evening, everybody. It's 7 o'clock, so we'll kick off the meeting. Just to remind everybody, this is a hybrid meeting. It's both on Teams and in the room. If you're not speaking, could you please turn your cameras off? Katie, thank you. Okay, so moving on to item first one. Apologies.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Apologies from Councillor Gregor Murray, and Chris Bowering is substituting tonight.
Thank you. Minutes from the previous meeting. Any? Pauline?
Thank you. I think the minute about staff thing was a bit lacking in some information. It wasn't just the budgets for staff pay that we were promised, it was also the numbers, and it was also interims and fixed term contracts, and that's all seems to be missing from here.
Page is that, Pauline?
Page 10.
Page 10. Yeah, I can expand on the detail.
Yeah, as long as I get the detail.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the minutes? Shirley? You mean the moat house? Yeah.
Shirley, that was actually what Andrew Mickleborough asked.
Yeah.
That's word for word what you said.
Oh, I see. Did it remain in the minutes if it's factually incorrect? Or
What page is that on? Sorry.
page 7.
It was the officers responded as well on the night, so I'm not sure if there is also a hostel in. No.
Help maybe it's up Mill Lane, and some bits up Mill of Mill Lane, but not that far are in Early. That hotel isn't in Early, but that is it?
It is.
Is in Early, yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the cottages there.
Yeah.
Yeah. The
Sorry, my mistake then.
two or
But
three
it's
cottages.
a hotel rather than a hostel, but yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on minutes? No. Do we have a proposal for them? Al, seconder. Chris, and a vote. Accept them? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Declarations of interest. The questions?
None, Chair.
Okay. Member questions.
Again, none received.
Okay. Right. So moving on to the first item, just to note, we've got a long agenda for this evening. So what we'd like to see is try and get the first two items wrapped up by 8:30 at the latest. Includes questions from members, so then we can move on to the MTFP. So what I'll do, I'll hand this over to Sarah, I guess.
Thanks. I'll keep it brief. You've obviously got the report in front of you. This item came in July to the committee. So to have a look at, and obviously there are a number of questions there with written reports going back, and I understand there was some training earlier this week as well. Online with us, we have a number of officers to support this item. So we have Narinda here, we've got Karen, we've got Fran, and we've also got representatives from our commissioned and partner services as well. Not all partner services, but some of them. So we've obviously got Katie from Cranston, Andrew from Berkshire Women's Aid, and Vicky from Kaleidoscopic. So Kaleidoscopic is one of our partner organisations that we work in through the networking and partnership board, and Cranston and Berkshire Women's Aid are part of our commissioned service providers as well. So everyone's here to answer any questions and see what we can do to, take this further. So thank you.
Dorinda, did you want to say something?
In the interest of time, not very much, Chair. The report attached outlines the key achievements and some of the challenges that we face on this agenda. I think members are aware that we are 1 year through a 3-year plan on domestic abuse, and much of the detail is provided in the report. So I'm happy to take any questions around the details. As Sarah said, we've got some colleagues joining us as well in terms of a panel of experts, and between us we will do our best to assist with any of the information that we can expand on, any information that members might want to see in addition, or any questions of interest in addition to the training session that's been held this week and the circulated report.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. We want the providers just to give a couple of a short, very intro of themselves?
So Katie, Andrea and Vicky, do you just want to turn your cameras on and just say a quick hi and a quick 30-second overview of the service provision you provide in the borough, please? Is that okay? Thank you.
Shall I go first? You said my name first. So hi, I'm Katie. I'm the service manager for Cranston Domestic Abuse Support Services. Very briefly, we offer a range of services. So we have our outreach service for victims and survivors. That's male, female, or any members of the LGBT community. So that's kind of emotional support, assisting with community orders. We have a 12-week seeking safety programme for the victim survivors. And we also signpost over to a different online programme as well, the Freedom Programme. We work with perpetrators on a 24-week men and masculinity programme. That's male perpetrators. We also do a one-to-one 12-week programme for female or LGBT perpetrators, or anyone who has barriers to attending our men and masculinity group, whether that's English not being their first language, or those that can't attend. And also we have a 6-week Phoenix programme for children who have experienced domestic abuse. This is kind of art therapy sessions, one-to-one with a therapist, and that's aimed at dealing with anxieties, coping strategies and empowerment. So that's us in a nutshell.
Thank you. Next.
I think I was next in that list. Hi everyone, my name is Andrea West and I'm the Chief Executive of Berkshire Women's Aid. Our current services in Wokingham consists of refuge provision in a 3-bed family refuge, but that provision forms part of the network of BWA refuges across all our areas, Reading, Wokingham, Bracknell and West Berks, and also part of the national refuge network, which is obviously accessible for survivors and families for whom either the placement in the Wokingham refuge isn't appropriate or isn't safe for them to stay in area. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention this evening was around building on our experience and learning from COVID and also the recent Domestic Abuse Act, that we're strategically looking to work very closely with the borough to deliver a more dispersed housing solution to ensure that the wider needs of victims, survivors and their children who can't be met in that current family refuge model is better met. And just quickly, we receive on average probably 50 calls from survivors and professionals to inquire about accommodation, and that translates into roughly 12 actual referrals across our housing offer each week. And reasons why individuals wouldn't be able to be accommodated in refuge range from no space, no appropriate size space, their needs around drug and alcohol use, disability adaptations, mental health, no recourse to public funds, or not being safe in areas. So the needs for that more dispersed housing model are even greater.
Great, thank you. And next, Vicky.
Hi, good evening. My name is Vicky Robertson and I'm the founder and CEO of Kaleidoscopic UK. For anyone who doesn't know, we are survivors of domestic abuse in different formats, and we provide ongoing threshold-free support for victim survivors, whether in or out of the relationship, no matter how long that's been, because we believe that that was a big gap that we identified ourselves as survivors, so wanted to provide that service. We have also then got our monthly support groups, which we run throughout the borough in different locations, as well as COVID has developed our online one as well, which is on a monthly basis. Alongside that, we run our Liberation programme, which is a follow-on to some of the starter programmes, which goes more into depth of the trauma bond and how to keep the cycle broken. Because actually, removing the perpetrator from domestic abuse does not stop the abuse. So we cover post-separation abuse, for example, and the tools to keep that cycle broken. Alongside that, we have also now developed our prevention programme, which we are delivering to schools for children and those that support them. So it's a two-pronged training, really, so with the children, but also with teachers or training staff as well. And yes, we've run our liberation programme now for the past 3 years with latest funding from the National Lottery, which is fantastic, enabling us to do that for local residents, as well as the monthly support groups that I've mentioned and feeding into the amazing services that have already been mentioned earlier this evening. And I'm really glad that Andrew's mentioned that, and obviously you have that in your paperwork today around looking at different formats, because actually the majority of people that we support do not flee. They are in their own homes in Wokingham, so safe accommodation within their own homes. But actually what that provision looks like can be slightly different because of the thresholds that they might not be either meeting or are meeting. So their provision is slightly different. So just to give you a sort of an upshot of our service provision, but actually that the majority of people that use our service ongoing, we have over 300 clients now within the Wokingham Borough. So again, it's a dip in, dip out, so they can choose how long they use our services for. So it's not something that we tell them how long they should be recovering from, if you like. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Anybody want to say anything else before we jump into members' questions? No? Okay, so jump into members' questions. I saw Laura. Okay, fire away, Laura.
Thank you. I've just got a couple of questions. Thank you, Sarah, and everyone else on the call. So going back to staffing, which we were talking about before. So I know that at the moment, the domestic abuse specialists, they've got an unsafe caseload number at the moment. And so you're looking to recruit more domestic abuse specialists, which is fantastic. The Safe Lives, safe number is considered 30. As I understand, 75,000 will go towards recruiting people, and that number will go down to about 35, which is still above the 30, which is not ideal at all. And I know last time we spoke about how domestic abuse survivors are coming forward at a greater pace. So should we not be looking to fund even more to get more domestic abuse specialists, seeing what's probably going to come on the horizon? And we're going to just have 35 anyway, which is not the safe number. And this is exactly where we should be putting money. Fran and Narinda, I think we were discussing this the other day. Do you want to come in on this, Narinda?
Yes, absolutely. I'm happy to. Yes, you're quite right, Laura, to identify that the Safe Lives best practice level is around about the 30 mark. And in relation to getting numbers down in terms of caseloads, we have got currently a growth bid, in terms of getting those numbers back to a level that is in line with good practice. But I think what we also have to do is recognise that there are other resources being put in as well as the commission service. So we have commissioned other additional services such as the older person's IDVA, which will also be taking some pressure, if you like, out of the service demand from the commission service. But also, I'd probably add that in terms of numbers, we keep a very, very close eye, in fact, a weekly eye on the numbers that are coming through in terms of service demand. So should the safe levels increase, even with additional funding put into the service that we're hoping to achieve, then we would absolutely go back to back to the growth bid process and make an additional business case to be able to get that figure back to where it needs to be. I would also probably add that whilst that is a good practice safe level, it is also recognised within the service that there is around about a 20% sort of margin either way of that good practice level. So we do keep that in mind as well, that numbers do fluctuate within that good practice level. So I hope that answers the question.
Just to add to that, Narinda, so Narinda alluded to already the fact that, if we needed to apply for further growth, that's something we would strongly consider, and we would come back, in the next round of bidding to request further growth. But there are other opportunities, we can look at grant funding, etc. I think the issue that we've got at the moment is, the national issue that we're seeing across the country, even globally, with the economy, and we really need to be looking carefully across the council at the bids that are being put in. And so we've put a special item in for this year. That is not to say that we can't put in further growth next year, if we see the demand increasing.
Thank you. That's really helpful. My second question was about the anti-abuse charter, which got cross-party support at the beginning of this year. And I wondered how that had gone, embedding it across the council, and how that's being measured and managed as well.
With the anti-abuse charter, really, I think, Lorna, when we spoke about this before, in sort of previous conversations, it is recognised that the anti-abuse charter really hangs on a premise that it is a reduction in violence and anti-violence across the board as a Wokingham Borough message. So what we hope to do is measure that and put some really stringent KPIs and measures around that as part of the development of the violence against women and girls strategy that we're developing. So have to say, at the moment, it's slightly underdeveloped and in the sort of infancy in terms of where we are in measuring progress and success, but we are looking to build that into the programme of KPIs and the suite of success measures as part of the violence against women and girls strategy that we're also have got on the agenda today, but also it will be fed back into this committee for additional information.
Thank you, Narinda.
Anybody else got any questions? Shirley, sorry, yes. How do you do?
Thank you, Chair. A couple of points. One is not a question. It's congratulations, actually, to, I'm not sure if that's the right word, to Kaleidoscopic, to Vicky. The video about the effects of domestic abuse on children on your website is just excellent, and it is really, really thought-provoking. It's very, very moving. So well done. So I just wanted to say, congratulations on that. Really, that's but not a question. But thank you for doing that.
Thank you so much. And yeah, it's actually why Kaleidoscopic actually exists, was seeing the gaps, especially for children. So I should have mentioned that we also offer support for children in the form of freedom programmes, which from next year we'll be running in person as well. So thank you very much for that. And yeah, please do feel free to use that as widely as you like. That's why we made it. And thank you so much for your feedback. Appreciate that.
Thank you. And the other question I have is probably for Narinda, but others may have a view on this. There was an item on Women's Hour last week about this so-called exempt accommodation that is springing up. And it seems that sort of criminal gangs and all sorts are exploiting a loophole which allows them to set up supposedly refuges in safe houses, and then they get housing benefit. And the idea is that they're exempt from all sorts of bills as long as they provide additional services. But the services they provide are somewhat lacking. And it was quite a harrowing report, because there were women who were being housed in these places that were finding that there were men in the places, there were people with mental illnesses in the places. They really weren't a place of safety and refuge. And straight after listening to it, I actually wrote to Zulfikar and said, are we absolutely certain we have no provision like this in the borough? And he said he was fairly certain that we didn't. But it occurred to me that a lot of people fleeing domestic violence in Wokingham may end up in other boroughs. And how can we be sure that people who are fleeing from Wokingham are not going to end up in some of this really unsuitable accommodation in other boroughs?
That's a really good question, actually, Shirley. in terms of our collective responsibility around ensuring victims don't end up in unsuitable accommodation, there's a couple of things we can do. One is the development and continued support of this dispersed and safe accommodation within the borough. So Andrea alluded to this earlier in terms of ensuring that our provision locally is suitable for a multitude of dispersed accommodation options. So what that means, put simply, is that where you have different accommodation needs for different families, such as those with larger families, those with children, and especially with a male child, for example, over the age of 12, at the moment possibly wouldn't be suitable for any refuge space sort of up and down the country.
You pressed the mute button, Narinda.
Sorry, what was the last bit you got? Any of it?
It was only the last 10 seconds or so.
Oh, so the collective responsibility really is around ensuring that we've got good options across the borough for anybody wanting to flee or wanting to have safe accommodation, for those options to be far-reaching. If they're going outside of the borough for safety reasons, then we can work collectively also with other Thames Valley local authorities, so that the options within the Thames Valley region are robust and secure, and also good in terms of what good practice looks like. And then further afield, obviously building into that narrative nationally, and also lobbying sort of nationally in terms of getting the voice of the victims heard from an accommodation perspective as well. So there's a number of different things we can do, all of which unfortunately don't guarantee that victims don't end up in, it doesn't guarantee that victims don't end up in unsuitable accommodation and unsavoury accommodation, but there is a number of different things we can do to try and help that to the best of our ability.
And it looks like Andrea wants to come in on that one. Andrea, did you?
Yes, just to back up what Narinda was saying. So the National Network of Refuges in particular, and they would not just be shared family refuges, but refuge provision, so could be dispersed. We would access that through a national database called Routes to Support, which is devised and overseen by Women's Aid and inspected. So that would be a safe route, absolutely. So if someone came to us through our helpline to access refuge and we weren't able to accommodate them either within a BWA refuge, not just Woking but elsewhere, or within county, and we would refer them outside. For women who face additional barriers to accessing refuge, there's also a scheme called No Woman Turned Away, which Women's Aid have put in place, which allocates a key worker for those women who might have challenges around substance use or complex mental health needs, who need that one-to-one support ongoing to access refuge space. And they're allocated that key worker as well, and that's a programme that we would refer into. So there are some safety mechanisms, quite rightly, as Narinda said, they're not going to guarantee that no one ends up in those really terrible places that you describe and that we've all seen, and has been the case for some time, especially around refugee women or women leaving prison. But we're increasingly seeing, but there are some mechanisms in place that we're able to use.
Thank you. That's reassuring, because we wouldn't want to allow women to go into some of these places and we lose touch with them and we don't know what's happening to them. I think that would be terrible. So thank you for the reassurance there.
Chris.
Yeah, just throw up from the training that we had earlier in the week, and figures that I brought up from Thames Valley Police, which indicate in the Thames Valley area, the increase in domestic call-outs for the police is in excess of 4,000, nearly 5,000 since up to October this year. With those sort of figures, I know it's the whole of Thames Valley, but there's no borders where domestic abuse is concerned. What sort of figures if anybody knows, are being reported to these agencies from the police involvement, or is it just the fact that the individuals are approaching the services or being referred through from other areas?
I see Karen's got a hand up there.
Yeah, just really to provide you with some reassurance that we do get monthly and quarterly figures from the police about the number of incidents attended. Obviously, that won't capture all the people affected by domestic abuse because some people will not feel able to report to the police for whatever reason. Also, within the figures that we get from Cranston, there is a breakdown of referral sources. The way that the police do their referrals is if it's, they always do a risk assessment. If it comes out high risk or medium risk, they will refer that case over. The high risks will go through the MARAC, the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference process. So then they'll get picked, an automatic referral is made to Cranston. Likewise, if it's medium risk, again, a referral is generated normally through the police team that they've got there, often to Cranston. Those that are assessed as standard risk of domestic abuse are referred to the Victims First Emotional Support Service, and they contact them to offer them support, either direct or they'll do a referral on to Cranston. But you're right, the numbers are going up. I've noticed the last few months, but when I've looked and compared it to this time last year, there is an increase. It's about 7%. So it is an increase, but it's not perhaps as much as I kind of feared it might be. The figures look really high to start with. But as I look in like month on month, like last year, we can compare those.
Thank you.
David.
Thank you. She's not an area of great knowledge for me, so I apologise in advance if the question I'm about to ask is ill-founded. But it seems to me in the service that we've got here at the moment and the work they've all done to make this service available to the victims, that in itself is like to spread a reassuring story to other victims to come forward. And I can potentially see more people gaining the courage to report domestic abuse who may not have done before, knowing that these facilities are here. And simultaneously, as Laura mentioned earlier, society is heading into a pretty dark place at the moment. We're in for a tough couple of years at best. And the pressures that cause or contribute to domestic violence are only going to increase. So are we certain that even with the numbers you've got in the growth bit for later, we are actually resourced and able to cope with what may be a steeply increasing demand for these services?
I'll let Narinda come in on that specific question, but I did want to just add something on what you said at the beginning about people coming forward. It's also worth bearing in mind that not everybody realises they're in a domestic abuse situation, and for a lot of people it's their normal. So a lot of the work that's done. So Vicky mentioned the programme that goes into schools. It's called the Educate to Eradicate programme. So Laura was at the Kaleidoscopic event when we actually heard that story from one of the victim survivors who was in a really awful situation, actually. But when she went to school as a child and was telling her friends about, had some of the things that were happening, they said, oh, yes, well, my daddy does that too. But it was not understood in the context. So for her, the abuse continued because she thought it was normal and didn't realise that it wasn't. So I just want that to be taken into account as well. A lot of this is about education as to actually what's not, what's right and wrong as well.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. I think just to reiterate what we sort of Fran and I said at the beginning, absolutely the growth bid that we in the finance figures that have gone in at the moment to reassure members are based on current demand and current need in the system. And given where everybody's financial trajectory and planning is at the moment, and how insightful we can be and how much of the future we can look into, it is only right and proper that we plan for the immediate sort of demand and service that we can see currently. If that shifts in any which way, and there is absolutely, we do expect things to get tougher financially, in terms of relationships, in terms of pressures on households, and it is expected that domestic abuse is one of those areas where, unfortunately, sadly, tragically, we're going to see a growth in the demand and service. then we will come back to the to having a look at what other available finances there are, whether that's grants or whether that's within the financial ask of the council's envelope in terms of demand in this area. So absolutely, we're watching it very, very closely, but sadly we do anticipate further growth, but we can only sort of plan at the minute for the what we have before us.
The other thing I just wanted to add as well, this is why it's also important for us to look at prevention as well, and the perpetrator programme is really important. One of the challenges you'll have seen in the report is that for all the referrals we're getting for victim survivors to our services, we're just not getting the perpetrator referrals, and we obviously need to work and challenge those behaviours. So there is information in the report in the action plan about some work to develop that, and that is obviously going to be a key focus for us to make sure that obviously we have the perpetrator programme through that Cranston's delivering, and actually reduce it. Obviously we're talking about reactive services here to a problem, but we obviously want to stop it from happening in the first place.
Thank you. When there's been an increase in the number of reported cases, it can be due to a combination of more domestic abuse or more reporting. And I wonder how you separate the two. Of course, we want the amount of domestic abuse to decrease, but that may be at the same time as the number of reports is increasing due to the efficiency and how well the system is working. Do we ask, when cases are reported, do we ask whether they could have come forward, whoever it was, previously, but maybe through not knowing what was available, what services were available, did not do so, or maybe were too frightened to do so? How do you separate the two? It's quite because we want to get less domestic abuse, but I would have thought the statistics were quite difficult to decipher.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to let some of my more expert colleagues come in and give you some information really around the statistical significance of, on average, there is research done with victims around how many incidents on average a victim of domestic abuse suffers before that victim comes forward. So I'm going to invite some of my other colleagues that are on the call today from Cranston BWA and Kaleidoscopic to come in and just talk to that possibly for a minute or two, because absolutely we want prevention is the best possible outcome here, but there is lots of research done in terms of this area of work, and I'll see Vicky's come on, so I'll let Vicky talk.
I don't want to hog it if anyone else wanted to do it. Sorry, I obviously put my camera on first. But yeah, as Narinda says, it takes on average, which is obviously an average because it depends on each person's situation, but 7 attempts of leaving an abusive relationship to stay left. And I can attest that mine actually took 32 attempts. So it isn't always 7. We obviously hope that it would be much sooner than that. But yes, you're right. Information is collected around Mareks, especially where there is repeat referrals. So that's definitely captured. And as Narinda mentioned, it takes on average, so an average 7 attempts of leaving, but also, yeah, around 35 incidents, but I believe that's also increased. And also what we have to recognise is that leaving is the most dangerous time for any victim survivor, because if you look at 2017, for example, the majority of people killed, 87% through femicide, is purely 1 month of leaving, and then the rest of the statistics within a year. So actually that time of them leaving is the most dangerous. So that threat that they're perceiving is very, very real. And obviously, if you have a non-molestation order, for example, it is ultimately a piece of paper. It depends how they then continue to further their abuse, which can be very slight, it can be very subtle. It's not always an arrestable offence, even though you have a power of arrest attached to your non-molestation order. So actually leaving that relationship isn't as simple as staying left, because they have ways of adapting to each situation. So again, the onus is put on the victim survivor. And actually, for myself personally, it was easier to take him back than put up with the harassment, the stalking, the physical threats, the following, all of the intimidation. So again, yes, you're right, absolutely. Those sort of things need capturing a lot better. How you do that is, yeah, it's hard to know where to start, but I hope that's given a little bit of an overview.
Thank you. I was just going to say, just to add, the reason why it's so much more dangerous at the point that someone leaves is because domestic abuse is about power and control. And once someone has left, then the perpetrator starts to lose that power and control, and they want to reassert it, which is why it is so particularly dangerous.
David.
Yeah, just going back to my previous point, and Vicky has articulated it far better than I possibly ever could, that if there is going to be an increase in demand for these services, it follows through. Hopefully there'll be a resolution, but some of that resolution will be women leaving the situation they're in. And therefore, it's not just having the kind of case workers, I'm putting that, to manage it. It's having the resources for those women to go somewhere safe. And that's the bit I was alluding to earlier. When you look further down the road as to how this evolves, have we got the resources in place for those safe places for women? Because I can't imagine much worse than having someone having the courage to take this situation and deal with it, and then there isn't a solution in sight.
I think that's a question about safe accommodation.
Yeah. Largely so, yes, but on whatever resources that means beyond there.
Yeah. So Andrea and Karen, probably best place to answer this.
I'll let Andrea go first.
Just building on the fantastic thing that Vicky just talked about, we work, all of us around this table work with these survivors and their children as individuals, and as centre of a whole network of support that we provide, so that when a survivor is leaving an abusive relationship, and the length of time that takes, that they don't do so in isolation, and we don't work in isolation. So accommodation is one part of that. Safe accommodation is one part of that. But it's part of that journey, as Vicky has described, about rebuilding and recovering, which can take a lifetime for some women and children. So it's not done in isolation, and it has to be done as part of a holistic network that involves statutory services as well as voluntary sector, as well as all the other services involved in that, and that joined up nature of that, and the training needs, and the awareness and the knowledge and expertise needs to be joined up as well.
Pauline. Oh no, sorry, Karen.
Yeah, and just to really kind of build on that, we are really doing a lot of work around, with the homelessness team. We've got a new domestic abuse housing specialist embedded within the homelessness team. So now every case that comes through to the homelessness applications where it's identified as domestic abuse, the specialist work has oversight of those cases. And we're really looking at lots of holistic options. So we've got, for example, the home refuge scheme, where we're putting in safety measures, additional safety measures. So if it's safe, and it has to be considered by the victim to be safe to stay in their home, we can look at additional security that might, make them feel a bit safer within that. There is a criteria. Obviously, the perpetrator can't live in the property, because if they did, or if they had rights to be there, that would sort of negate some of the measures. So we've got that, and we're also kind of looking at, that wider housing response. But it is interesting that there's been quite an increase in the number of domestic abuse cases flagged up by the homelessness team. I think the homelessness team are getting increased applications anyway. Say cost of living, there's all sorts of reasons. But, again, that is being sort of monitored. So that's kind of one of the other sort of things we're looking at. And the community-based support that we've got through Cranston, the longer support options through Kaleidoscopic, again, really part of that, really focusing on how we can keep people safe, all victims safe. Looking at safety planning, letting them know what their options are, and sort of working with all our different organisations to kind of build as, best support mechanism as we can.
Thank you. Pauline.
Thanks. We've talked a lot about dealing with the outcome of domestic abuse, but I think Sarah made a very good point about prevention. And I'm just wondering, you're talking about prevention by the time you've got somebody that potentially is already committing abuse. What are you doing in schools to try and educate kids in the first place to make sure that it isn't acceptable.
Well, Vicky's the one with the Educate to Eradicate programme. Just to go beyond that, I mean, that was particularly the perpetrator programme I was referring to, but also the next item on the agenda, which is the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy, will form part of the prevention, because it's obviously challenging the deep-rooted issues of misogyny in society as well. So that's part of that, and domestic abuse is a pillar of FORG. But the specific question on the Educate to Eradicate programme, Vicky, I don't know if you want to come in on that.
Yes, absolutely. It's the main issue that we're coming across is getting the school engagement, because domestic abuse is still such a taboo subject, yet we know 1 in 5 children are subjected to domestic abuse, and that's the known cases, whereas we know up to about a third remain unreported. So it is really, really important. We are working with a few schools, but yeah, we need more school engagement. I have, with Karen's help, spoken at, you know, meetings, head teacher conferences, things like that. But it's getting that school engagement is where we're struggling specifically. But we do offer our E2E programme from year 1 upwards, obviously age appropriately and very different, but it's a very hands-on programme. It's not an assembly, it is working with the kids, because that's how you get the best understanding and knowledge. But yeah, please do contact us if you want to, you know, a more in-depth view of what it is we provide. And we won't come in and work with the children unless we've educated those staff within that school, because if you don't, what you are creating is a barrier for those children, because you're going to educate them on what's right, what's wrong, how to reach out. But if they aren't heard, which Sarah highlighted of one of our speakers at the conference, and actually I hear that day in, day out, is that my children aren't heard, they're not understood, you know, yet they've tried to reach out. So if people aren't able to understand what it is children are saying, or the pattern that goes with, or the signs to look out for, which, you know, for example, we asked at the conference who would know how to identify a child subjected to domestic abuse in the home, and we had, out of 100 people, less than 5 hands up. So I think it shows that there's work to do with both those that support children as well as children and that prevention.
I think you might have slightly misunderstood my question. I was talking about children would then grow up to be perpetrators. Sorry,
I did misunderstand your question. Vicky, you might be, you know, you probably could actually talk about that as well, because obviously the trauma from being a victim and what that relates to. So I'll let you come in on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's really, really important. And that's part of what we do. The Educate to Eradicate programme isn't just around this is what domestic abuse is and this is what it looks like or feels like to be a victim. It's very much what is acceptable, what isn't acceptable, and working on those behaviours and challenging the sort of stereotypical narratives around relationships, which also feed into bullying in the playground. So that's kind of a way that, you know, everyone can understand, perpetrator or victim, but actually, yeah, making sure that it's age appropriate. But absolutely, it's so vital to tackle. And I do believe there should be more services.
I think my final question is, can we join up the Children's Services Department that provide education with these guys who are trying to stop domestic abuse, so that we can push further into the schools the understanding of what's acceptable and what isn't before we get domestic abuse?
Karen's going to answer that, but just to point out that I'm working with Prue as well, Exec Member for Children's Services, and she is a trustee of Kaleidoscopic.
Yeah, so I was just going to say that alongside, I mean, obviously the ideal is where we can actually get into the schools and help with that education, and you know, really, you know, thrilled that Kaleidoscopic are making such efforts to do that. But alongside that, yeah, working with Children's Service, so I'm having regular meetings with the education leads, and we're looking really holistically how we can support the schools. They are statutorily required to provide education in the schools around healthy and unhealthy relationships. So we want to make sure that they've got all the information that they need. That's included. We've drafted a booklet for the schools looking at, you know, perhaps some basic sort of hints and tips what might be helpful, but we're also having to look quite creatively. So for example, there's work going into schools around some elements of healthy lifestyles and that, so sports, things like that. So things, where the council employees are already kind of working with the schools, got that bit of the foot in the door, sort of really looking at how we can build on that. Because the offer's been made several times by Kaleidoscopic. The schools are very fortunate to have that offer. So we just really need to encourage them now to sort of start taking that up. But alongside that, sort of giving the schools that information they need. We're also aware the police have got, they call it Operation Encompass. So basically any incidents that they attend where there's children in the household, they endeavour to find out which schools the children are at, and then they send a notification to the school by the next morning. So actually if there's any, if perhaps a child's turned up with the wrong equipment, or perhaps they're very tired because they've been up all night, the schools are aware of that. So really kind of making sure that the schools really fully equipped. So if they get those notifications, they know what to do. But it's all very much kind of, we're trying to give them an open door, please let us know what you need, tell us how we can help you, and really sort of trying to push from that angle.
Maybe we could get some statistics about the coverage in the borough schools of the prevention end of things.
Yeah, unfortunately with the Op Encompass data, we only, because it comes on the police area, we can only get information for Wokingham and Bracknell together. But we are we do get that number through about how many notifications have been given. We don't get individual school detail, but we sort of do have a bit of a handle on that.
I think you're on the wrong subject again. I'm talking about how many schools have taken advantage of the training about prevention and about healthy relationships, and making sure that people understand that it's not acceptable, rather than the important but different people understanding how to deal with people who are victims. It's two separate things. I would prefer to have less prevention and less victims than better dealing with victims if we had to choose. I prefer to prevent it than sort it out afterwards.
Yeah, and as I say, all the schools have a statutory responsibility to deliver that input. But potentially, obviously, if Vicky's happy to do so, could obviously provide updates on how many of the schools are taking on board the some more, specialist service that and input she's able to provide through the organisation.
Thank you. That data would be nice. Thank you.
Okay. Narinda, did you want to say something there?
I just want to come in really quickly just to say that we are also working with our public health colleagues who are currently just in the process of, and our new public health consultant, Karen Brady, who is currently in the process of looking at auditing some of the work that we're doing and our offer as a borough within the PSHE agenda, which is very much where some of this work and some of the wider community safety work would fall. So this is part of the sort of rolling programme for whatever going forward we can offer as a better offer to the schools within the PSHE agenda, to put this in, to really embed it and bake it into the programme of work that we're offering as a borough. So just want to add that as well.
Thank you. I do have a bunch of questions which we had the training on Tuesday, and I had some questions come out of that which I sent on to Karen. She has answered those on an email just before this meeting, but I just want to read them out just for the record, so then we can get them as a written response in there. So I asked, how long does a case typically take to resolve? Again, this refers to the workload. If we've got a case takes a long time, we get more and more workload, we're going to start seeing gaps or issues arise. Next one, what is the success criteria for when someone can exit the programme? How do we know we've done a good job? What happens if only the statutory requirements are delivered and associated staffing is required for that? So, for example, if we just run out of funding completely, we just have to go for the minimum statutory. What is the impact on our community? In a perfect world, what would be required level of staffing? And what is the difference between what we have now and what that level would be? Again, that would be a written response. I asked about the costs for home modifications. If we're seeing a lot of people getting home modifications, we've got an increasing cost base there. So I was looking at where we're going with that to see what the implication is to the council. The perpetuator service. So that's following on from Pauline, really. I was asking about referrals. How do we get referrals into that? Do we engage with the law services? So, for example, if the police do go and visit a case, do they refer the victim on, but also do they refer the perpetuator on? So I just wonder if there's a gateway there so we can actually pick up people who are actually causing the issues. I think this next question is response times. I think this is going to be useful for Cranston here, because they're a national organisation. We're hearing data that there's more and more cases occurring. How, as a national body that are supporting this, are you seeing this, and how do you feel that your organisation is going to be able to cope with that extra workload?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question, isn't it? With response times at the moment, I mean, we aim to respond to any clients within 24 hours, working hours, of the clients coming into us. Obviously, that's very much dependent on staffing. So if we get more clients, then, you know, the importance of this growth and keeping an eye on our figures is really important for that.
And subsequent to that, I guess there is a reporting out to the council here to say that you're under strain. So the concern I have is, as a national organisation, if you're getting impacted by another county or whatever sucking your services, does that leave a gap in the services that you provide to us? And we need to basically know about that. I guess there's some measurement somewhere about that.
I'm not sure I completely understand. The staff that we have for Cranston here work specifically for the Wokingham area. So the Cranston employees are not impacted by our workload, or we're not impacted by the national workload of Cranston.
Okay, that's what I wanted to hear.
Okay.
Next question is quite a dubious one. What would be the council's exposure to a failed case? Because we see headlines about so-and-so failed and issues. What's the danger to the council for that? And again, we've got written answers here from Karen, but I think they'll be useful for the rest of the committee to see the answers to those questions. Okay. Going through the presentation and talk that you gave us, with regards to schools, I guess talking to the curriculum providers as well, getting on the PSE curriculum, so it actually is part of the curriculum. It sounded very much like you kind of doing that. Do you have alerts if staffing is under pressure? So you know that actually we're in danger here, so we know when to take some action to get appropriate temporary staffing, say.
So that would come down to the regular contract monitoring, won't it, Narinda?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to reassure really that Cranston obviously have, and Katie's on the call today, a service manager in place. It's very much Cranston and Katie's role to ensure that that is, just as any business continuity arrangements would be in place, to ensure that those issues are dealt with and managed in terms of this operational service requirements. That is outlined within the service spec that we have with Cranston as a service, but also really to overly reassure, we also have really a very good relationship with Cranston. So at any given point, you know, if there are any concerns, we would expect a phone call or, you know, a frank and candid conversation about what's going on in the service, because it's collectively that we can sometimes help assist with some of those issues, pressures and concerns. But to reassure, it's within the contract monitoring arrangements, but also we have, you know, that daily contact if we need it with Cranston.
Great, thank you. That brings the end to my questions. Nobody else? So I'm going to call this agenda item to a close. So I'd like to say thank you to everybody attending and thank you for the answers.
They're also here for the next item.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next item. So again, Sarah, would you like to introduce 57?
Yes, so this is about developing a violence against women and girls strategy, otherwise known as VORG. So we are in the process of developing that strategy. We wanted to bring it to this committee at the overview stage so that we could set the strategic direction with everyone's input in. Also, we'll go out to consultation. I think, all the information is in there. But this is your opportunity to sort of feedback on the process of developing this strategy. And any thoughts about that strategic direction you think we should be taking as part of that. And if you would like it, we can bring this back at draft stage and before it goes through for voting on. So I don't think there's too much more to say at this stage, unless any officers, don't know if Narinda or Fanny want to say anything.
No, just Sarah, you've covered it there, but really just to say that the VORG agenda, or the Violence Against Women and Girls agenda, is of national importance and equally of local importance to us. The strands within it very much are around prevention and also social cultural changes, and that is huge masses of work in terms of embedding that work into different levels of society. And we will be developing a strategy that is relevant to Wokingham and Wokingham's populace and our demographics, that is sort of mirrors our needs and is evidence-based. So we will, the outline of the timeline is within the report. We will bring back something with more information and more information really around what that looks like in terms of themes and a strategy for Wokingham. And at that point, really, at this point, it's just for bringing it at a very early stage so that members of the committee can have an opportunity to have any comments or steer us in a direction where you think we may have missed or you'd like to comment on at this stage.
Thank you. Laura.
Thank you, and thank you, Sarah, for your offer to bring it back in draft format. I think we'll all welcome that at a future meeting. I'm interested in White Ribbon specifically, and I wondered what measures are being used at councils who have signed up to White Ribbon accreditation and what successes they've had, because I'm trying to gauge what measures we'd be using as a council with it.
And before Narinda comes in, we will obviously look at what other local authorities are doing as part of the development of this, because we obviously need to understand what success looks like, and we need to determine that through this strategy and what we're going to measure that success on. So we will expect to have a set of KPIs that come out of this. I can't at this stage say what they're going to be because we're at that early development stage, and that will come out of the process of developing this strategy. But looking at what other local authorities are doing will be part of that. I did speak, I think last year, and get some information from Surrey County Council, who have done this, and they shared some really insightful information. I haven't got it in front of me right now, but they went through the accreditation process, and I can share with you actually some of the stuff they said about the benefits it brought and what it's meant for them. But there's a list of a number of other local authorities that have White Ribbon accreditation on the site, and we can reach out to them and find out their thoughts as well.
That'd be really useful. Thank you, Sarah. And is it going to be, are you ambitious enough to have it that it's going to be a percentage decrease in reports to the police on harassment over so many years? Is it going to be that granular? Because I know that you're a fan of smart measurements.
Would love them to be smart. As to what those smart measurements will be, I don't know yet, but these are ideas that we can feed in and put into that process and see what we end up coming out with. I don't want to be at the stage of saying it's definitely going to be this, but measures have to be smart, so you can determine what success is. So thank you.
Any other questions? No. Norman.
Looks like you're taking the draft strategic themes to the Community Safety Partnership just in a couple of weeks' time. Do we have an inkling of the strategic themes now that you can share with us this evening?
Narinda?
We've got some inklings, yes, around draft themes. Prevention and education and awareness will be of no surprise to committee members in terms of embedding that and talking about the VORG agenda in terms of prevention, education and awareness. Also, another thematic strand will be safe spaces and safe places. So this is very much around our sort of town planning and borough development. So around designing spaces that are well lit, that are obviously feel secure and safe for all members of our community, but in particular women to be in. So whether that's train stations, taxi stands, our town centres, or urban planning that we do within some of our developments. Those are two of the key themes that I can outline for you this evening. And there are others in development, including strengthening our approach to the criminal justice system. So working very closely with police and also with the CPS around getting better outcomes for victims and being more being more robust in being able to offer that service to victims in terms of better reassurance of outcomes for victims in cases that are reported and the way that victims are treated by the criminal justice system. So that's another key theme as well. So those are really the three sort of key themes that really that we're looking to develop. There are one or two others that are a little bit less better developed, but those are sort of the key ones that I can share this evening.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No, I think I do have a question myself, was really about the success criteria and the impact statement of the two, and I think that was alluded to with what Laura's question was, specifically seeing reports of how successful White Ribbon is with its impact on other bodies and how successful it has been there, because I think that gives us a bang for our buck, as it were. Okay, does anybody else have any questions on the, oh, sorry, Sarah.
I was just going to say, not just White Ribbon, but VORG as well, and other, like, so White Ribbon is a pillar, is a part of VORG. It's an aspect of it, but it's much wider, and looking at what other local authorities have done in that area as well will be something we can be looking at as well.
Thank you. Anybody else? No.
Could I just end by saying that 25th of November, I think it is actually White Ribbon Day and the 16 days of action. And we are going to be looking at doing some stuff around that, and we're just finalising what we can do around that. But there will be lots of activities and things that can be done to show how important this agenda is and raising awareness of it is. And I know Vicky's arranging 16 days of action through, I think it's something like 100 sit-ups a day or something. She's got a programme going I can circulate, which is put together. But it's really important, I think it's really important that we really raise awareness of this and get people talking about it, because it's frustrating that it's always seen as women who have to change what we do in order to stay safe, and that's not the right way of looking at it, and raising that awareness would be great if we can all get on board. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Laura.
I just want to support what you said, Sarah, and I think Katie at Cranston, you mentioned to me that during that period as well, you're going to have vigils in Woodley and Wokingham for the victims who did not survive, which I'll be going to support the Woodley one. So I'll be there. So I don't know if you want to give any more details now.
Well, I can't really at the moment because everything's all kind of, we're not completely confirmed, but we are trying to work kind of all together really to try and deliver, you know, the most amount of awareness that we can. But yeah, as soon as I can get some certainties on it, I'll certainly share it with everyone.
Shirley.
Can I just ask, in that case, this, when this publicity is available, will it be spread widely into our schools, libraries, as many places as possible, advertising these events?
Well, I've already been talking to the comms team about it, so I've had an email today and we're just going through that. So I will certainly ask about the breadth of how far that's going out. But yeah, we're just finalising all the details and we'll get that out. But yeah, I will pass that on about getting out to schools as well.
Yeah, I think it should be spread far and wide, you know, doctor surgeries, all sorts of places, just so that people really know what's.
I agree.
Okay, so I'll bring that one to a close with the request to Sarah to come back with the draft plan for us at a future date. We'll work out. I was just about to say when we can negotiate a suitable date based upon our agenda.
Well, I can tell you when it needs to be in terms of the programme. It's in the agenda and it's been proposed that it comes back on the 6th of March. Any sooner, it would be too soon to do, and any later, it will be going to executive. So that's when it will be available for you, if that's okay.
That is fine. Thank you.
Can I also just say a big thanks to all the officers and all our partner organisations who've been here tonight. Really appreciate the support and coming and speaking with the committee tonight. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you, team. Okay, moving on to the next item, which is the medium-term financial plan. We're going to do it slightly differently to how we did it last week. We're going to have Graham do his initial preamble for it, and then we're going to introduce each of the executive members who are going to talk about their section and then be subject to questioning, intense questioning from us, with the idea of actually questioning the plans to make sure they're viable, but also coming up with some ideas, because I know, Pauline, you came up with some excellent ideas last time. So, yeah, Graham, do you want to take it away?
I think, Imogen, you want to say a few words first, don't you?
Microphone.
Yeah, it's just sort of good evening and just reminding everybody of why we're here as we're approaching probably one of the worst financial years we've seen in the history of this borough council, with a currently predicted revenue deficit of 4 million for next year, never mind capital. The legacy of COVID is not over, Brexit has not helped, and the combined conflict with Russia affecting energy prices means that inflation is causing many problems for everyone, including this council. On top of this, our adult social care reforms are likely to cause significant additional problems next year. They're not funded properly by central government. So every saving we make is important, and we are here hoping to find more opportunities for savings and revenue generation. This meeting is about giving you the opportunity to see what options we're already looking at so far, and more importantly, it gives you the opportunity to question and input ideas into the process. And I'll let Graham speak now.
Thank you, Imogen. Thank you, Chairman. Okay, just to orientate people who haven't been at all the previous meetings, we first started with the summary position quite some time back now. And as Imogen said, that showed a £4 million gap next year in revenue and 14 million in capital. Following the summary overview and context, we then moved into place and growth, where we had a very extensive session on that. And in the context of using this time most usefully, I'm going to go through and group these by lead members. So I'll be going through the slides, and each lead member will speak where they feel there are particular issues they want to bring to your attention, and where they are of particular magnitude. Obviously, you've got the pack with all the bids in and the bid templates that support. So even if the lead member doesn't cover a particular item, you can, of course, ask the question at the end of the lead member's canter through. Again, just to say that we're focusing on year one, that doesn't mean we're ignoring year 2 and 3. It's just year 1 is the budget that we will be setting at council. And of course, there'll be a next year round to be able to look at a year 2 or 3. But we're not saying you can't ask questions or focus on 2 and 3, but primarily on year 1 if we can. And so at the end of the session, I think it's really open to you, once the lead members run through, ask questions and also put forward suggestions of where you think we could do something better, more cost effectively, or generate more income, that type of thing. This session, as stated, is for Revenue and Capital, the Chief Executive's Directorate and Resources and Assets Directorate, and we have all the members supporting those areas, both physically present and virtually, and we have some officers in support as well. That's what I'll be covering. So to start with, just 2 actions that I'm aware of that followed through from a previous meeting. One is where I have previously stated that we'll use the presentation to the Personnel Board, it was called the HR Committee, the Personnel Board. That's been corralled. This is the agency consultancy, things out of IR35. That's being corralled through HR. So I'm saying I'm not duplicating that myself, but I'll make it available to yourselves as stated last week. The other item I said I would come back at the corporate or resource and assets presentation was the grants position and the assumption of grant for next year. Obviously, any variation upward would be fantastic, and I must say would be quite surprising. Any variation downward, then we obviously need to be working in the background of 4 million plus what the contingency would be if it's harder than that. So as I say, this is a continual work in progress.
Just going to interrupt you there, Graham. We've got some people still dialed in from the previous agenda items, so feel free to stay on and listen if you really want to, but you can drop off.
Okay, this just restates, it keeps a log, let's say, of all these key challenges that we're facing, which is a representation of what Imogen was saying at the outset, but it goes into more detail, and this will be part of the CFO report, and some of these will become clearer as time moves on. Right, I'm going to start with Councillor Ian.
Chris, go on.
Sorry, Graham, I just want to ask you about the business rates. That's related to the number of businesses and the business that they're conducting. So presumably you might have an idea how that's going, and if the business is contracted, presumably that figure's likely to go down. It's a big figure, obviously.
Yes, the business rates is a complex area. So the actual debit has increased, as in new businesses come in over the years, and the multiplier that goes into the calculation has increased as well. The collection remains quite reasonable, so we closed at about 99% last year, and we're there or thereabouts this year. So there's no reason for alarm in terms of businesses closing, moving out, and over the years there's been a continual modest positive trajectory. The real issue around business rates that I've flagged is more to do with what's called a revaluation, which almost certainly won't come into play for 23-24 because of the huge amount of work that would take from a government perspective, and there's plenty else on the government's agenda. But a rebasing of business rates will not be favourable for authorities like us who have tended to grow, and there would be a redistribution to areas that have suffered in terms of their business rate base. That's why I flagged it as a risk. It's more of a local government funding calculation based on a rate
business rate resetting. So I'm going to start with Councillor Ian Shenton, and Ian will go through the most pertinent points, and I'll canter through the whole lot, picking out Ian's name, and then we'll get to the end of Ian's, and then there'll be questions, etc.
Helps if I have my microphone on. Good evening. There are relatively few items with my name on, which is probably why I get to go first, and obviously sport and leisure. There is a savings bid for maiden early 3G pitch, but at the moment I would simply say that that project is under review. The second one with my my name in the savings bids is charging for parking at Cantley, and I particularly am concerned that that needs very careful thought if we are to go down that track. I think if you look at the support document RAR3, you will see it's flagged as red, but that doesn't affect us in 23-24. That would only be coming in later than 23-24. Then there is a growth bid, which is because the sport and leisure, the leisure centres are basically underperforming in terms of revenue generation. Since COVID, they have not recovered. And as a consequence, we are putting in a growth bid to cover that. It's perverse, but what it means is the income is down rather than we're actually going to spend any more money in that area. And I think that's it for there's an accompanying revenue bid, revenue special item for the one-off growth, again to support leisure income recovery, and that is, I think, coming back to the fact that we've not been able to mount some of the events that might otherwise have gone ahead. Then we're in capital. And capital, I've just got a couple of things to talk about. One is the new pool at Arborfield. The school is at the moment considering further amendments to what it has, and the whole project will need to be recosted. And certainly I personally think that at the moment, with energy through the roof, we can't necessarily expect energy prices to be coming down. If we're going down to go ahead with that project, we will need to totally review to make it as even more energy efficient than Carnival Hub. The only other thing that I have in there is I've lost it on the page now. But it's leisure centre refurbishments. Where we have some very good assets. We have to keep them in condition, and I think that covers just about everything with my name on it.
Questions, Polly?
Thank you, Ian. I wonder if you could shed a bit more light on that rather obscure, obtuse comment about the 3G pitch. What is that 35 grand actually, and what's likely to happen?
I'm not seeing 35 grand.
3 times 15.
Sorry, yeah, it's 15 grand a year, sorry.
Oh, 45.
Sorry, can't add up, must be too early in the evening.
I'm not clear what that is, because I actually don't see that there's going to be any short-term savings on that if we go ahead.
Yeah, Graham's is indicating he can answer this.
Yes, this was based on, say, mimicking the performance at Cantley Park and other 3G pitches of Embrook, whereby, and it's also in line with the business case that was presented to executive when we sought consultation or preferred site in the first place. So it's a modest surplus after the costs of running the site and sinking fund, etc., and capital financing costs. Obviously, the whole thing is subject to reviewing that business case, but when it was put forward, it was based on other 3G pitches that we've been operating.
Thank you, Graham. I'm a bit dubious about that being in 23, 24.
You may well be right, Pauline. Obviously, Ian, sorry, I didn't mean to cut across. Go on in.
I was going to say that that is why we're reviewing the whole thing. We're looking at the potential business case again, because cost assumptions have changed significantly. The amount of money that would need to be borrowed would be somewhat higher than had previously been estimated, and the amount of revenue may not be covering those costs, which is why it's being reviewed completely.
Al.
Yeah, can I just ask about car parking fees at Cantley Park? I mean,
Sure.
I don't particularly know about that, but when the controversial TRO was passed last year, it was guaranteed there'd be no car parking fees at Laurel Park in Early. Was the same guarantee given to Cantley Park about charging car parking fees?
I'm not aware of a guarantee being given. I know this was considered before, but it was shelved, it was put off. And I can understand the reasons why it was put off. You certainly don't want to deter people from dropping in to use the cafe. Again, it's too easy to park on the roads alongside, and therefore you'd have to use buckets of yellow paint, creating yellow lines. I want some more active discussion about that before it goes ahead.
Okay, David.
Yeah, well, you've almost anticipated my question there, Ian. I mean, there's a large amount of other parking space available there. The main road, and particularly the housing area behind Cantley Park. My experience backing onto California Country Park is that when charges are increased, people find alternatives. So apart from the fact that it will irritate the local residents, does the figure you've put in here include potentially fewer people parking at Cantley and going elsewhere, and possibly an increase of people who decide to walk or cycle to Cantley rather than drive?
Well, I don't believe the original proposal did, which is why I'm in the process of as you know, we have a new lead on sport and leisure, and I want to make sure that every aspect of this is examined. I mean, do you want to be continuing to penalise people who are already paying a very high price to use the pitches? And yes, you could put yellow lines on the Twyford Road and even in the small development behind on Bishop's Drive. But of course, you've crossed the road, you've got a new estate still in construction, not adopted. People would potentially clog up roads in there. I think it needs very careful consideration.
Okay, thank you. Pauline.
It's an observation really rather than a question. When we were reading this, it's sort of obvious that it's all rather fragmented. You've got Dinton in one place, you've got Cantley in a different place. What's the difference? Not sure. I know one is slightly different facility. I'm just wondering if there's any savings to be made in actually looking across the piece and putting the management of all these very similar facilities in one place and having a standard set of policies rather than having different little fiefdoms within the council having different views about what you should be charging for and what you shouldn't. It's just really an observation. I don't know if there's a possibility of saving any money there, Graham, as well. Same could be said for bridleways and public and footpaths. Well, and
that has already been suggested, Pauline, and we will be actively looking at it. But it's a very early doors on this proposal to potentially to charge for parking at Cantley. But there are other things, other synergies you can see between some of the countryside properties and Cantley. And Cantley is a personal view. I think it's underutilised. One of the problems, it's not straightforward to get to and from the town centre. And sure, I mean, if we could encourage more people to get there on foot or by bike, then that's a good thing overall. But I don't particularly want to see car parking charges might achieve that, but they might also achieve something negative, and we really need to be, I think, examining it. That's why there is nothing in 23-24, because whilst there was something originally there, I felt that was going to take far longer than was estimated if we were to go down that route.
Okay, Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask Ian about RAR12?
12, that's
RAR12, yeah.
Oh, there we are.
Growth bid for unachievable income generation.
Yeah.
Unachievable. Oh, sorry. Yeah, page 102. Sorry. And unachievable income from Cantley Events Field due to no Christmas market being run each year. An estimated income. But I just kind of can't get my head around what that actually means.
Well, there would have been a growth bid a savings bid for revenue from that historically, because it was obviously tried in 21-22, and so there would have been a savings bid in there, and of course that has not. It didn't work basically, and it's not going to be repeated, and as such, therefore, there has to be a growth bid to take it back out, to take the revenue back out again.
Right. Okay, I understand that now. So, so this is the Christmas market.
It took me a while to get my head around it.
Yeah, fine. Well, I'm glad I'm not alone. So there's no plan to try the Christmas market somewhere else, closer to the town centre, Elmsfield, for example, because half of the problem with the Christmas market was at Cantley, and people didn't want to go there, as far as I can gather.
No, there's no firm plan to do that, but I mean it's something that could be looked at. But rather than try and bake that into the budget at this stage, we just kind of go down this route instead.
Ian, Imogen's got her hand up.
I'm only really indicating because I've got my Leader of Wokingham Town Council hat on, and Wokingham Town Council owns Elmsfield as opposed to the borough. You know, if somebody came along and said, "Hey, we'd like to run a Christmas market there," we probably going to be something that we would be willing to do, but we were never approached and never asked. But I understand what you mean by the middle of town. It is a good venue, and I think that was a lot of what was wrong with the Christmas market at Cantley.
I've just got a question or stroke comment for you, Ian. With regards to the car parking at Cantley, this is just a comment. Don't forget to include Wokingham Theatre into the impact statement there. The next one is
absolutely right. Yeah.
RAR12. It might be worthwhile. You've got a comment there saying outdoor gym equipment. It might be worthwhile talking to the parish councils about that. So I know Winnersh did it, and I know the town council are looking at it. So ask them to do it.
And that's a very interesting suggestion. Thank you, Peter.
Looks like we've got no more questions for you. Oh, we do. Pauline.
Sorry, just so I make sure I understand it, now that I've got my head around Shirley's, is this an income or a cost, which I had the same question about. What's the one-off growth to support leisure income recovery on page 72, and why is it different?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes,
I think you did a really good job of answering the growth, but so just to reinforce and why they're different. So the growth represents the fact that in previous budgets, we had put leisure income targets for particular activities very ambitiously, which have proven to be over ambitious, and therefore we have to strip out that ongoing income target in an ongoing way. That's what the growth is. the special item, and just so you all know, I know you look in your paperwork, I'm also going, whenever anyone's talking about a line, I'm projecting it on screen, just if that's helpful for you, so you know. This one-off growth is really representing the fact of the slow bounce back. So it's recognising that we will struggle to get back to where we were by at least 70k. I think that's a real quite stretched target. And then that reduced to 30k. And then we're saying by 25, 26, we get back to usual operations. So one was a stripping out an idea for good, and the other one was recognising the general impact of COVID on the leisure market.
Can I just check and make sure I understand? The first one, the 150 grand a year, is a removal of a growth item, and the second one is a reduction in a projected income that was baseline. Is that right?
Almost. The first one's a removal of a savings item.
Yeah.
Sorry, that's what I meant.
In which case you're correct.
Yeah, the first one is a lack of income. That was a target to increase income, and the second one is a reduction in the actual income.
No. What the difference between the two is this: one is recognizing that an idea to generate 150k indefinitely is not going to work out, so we have to strip it from the books indefinitely. So, and those were the idea, you know, the ice rink and fair, etc. The next one is just a general recognition of the return to normal, which then gets back to normal in 25, 26, but it doesn't strip anything out altogether. It's just a phased return back to normal.
That's what I was trying to say, but I obviously didn't quite get it right. But yeah, yes.
Sorry, just a comment on that one. We've got a lot of private gyms running around who seem to be increasing their membership and actual making money. How come we're not competing with those? And that's probably a question not for this, but it's a throwaway question.
Oh, I can answer it, and of course income, but we are, Places Leisure run all of our major activities, and they are doing pretty well, particularly in certain areas. This leisure is a lot more than standard commercial gyms. It's all of our early intervention, prevention, steady steps, all that stuff. So we're our clientele is very much more of a vulnerable audience, as opposed to those that are very fit, active, want to and embrace post-COVID world. So it's not quite the same thing. This is about the whole remit of the leisure function, as opposed to just the Places Leisure standard gyms.
Thank you. You've just enlightened me. Pauline.
Just going on from that, looking at RAR12 and making sure I understand it properly. Does this piece of paper say that the total income is currently 1.482 million, and this is 150,000 reduction in that?
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I think they do make money, just not as much as we wanted.
Absolutely right.
Okay, sounds like we're done with Ian, so let's go on to the next one. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you.
Sorry, so the next lead member under the spotlight is all right. No, it's Councillor Sarah Kerr. So I will run through the slides and pick up all of Sarah Kerr. So here's the first slide.
Okay, I've got a few, and I've got to find them all in the different places. So if I just go through in chronological order that's in the pack, if that's okay, and we start off with the Chief Exec Office and the revenue bids and the savings first. So I'll just go through, and other than the top one, they've all got my name on them. So yeah, these are all savings that we're proposing. So fairly self-explanatory there. I think obviously, you know, reducing mobile phones. You've obviously got the reports as well, outlining a lot of this in the pack as well. yes, effective use of council-owned community spaces. So looking at the assets that we have, understanding what our community needs are, and rather than having everything sort of segregated, actually working together much more productively to understand what we need, and looking at ways that we can work with partner organisations much more to deliver those services. The apprenticeship posts have been vacant for quite a while, actually. So there's obviously not a need for those at the moment, so we can reduce those down. There's a little line there on advertising in libraries. Obviously, there's a lot going on with the telephone lines. Obviously, we're moving over to VoIP. We've got all the Teams telephony coming in, so things are moving on, which is obviously allowing us to reduce on the mobile phones as well. And then obviously got the reduction in cloud service spend there. So this, apart from R2, I believe, no, R2 and R3 is all in the IT area. I've got one growth bid in, which is the new website, which many of us have had a briefing on anyway. I think there's another briefing coming next week for others on this, but ultimately the website is not going to be online from next July, end of service. There are a number of issues with the website anyway, and obviously bringing a new website online and going through that process at the moment. Special items, I've got two down the bottom. So this is in the customer experience side of things. So these are existing special items that have been previously approved, and we're finishing those off. But this is about tackling failure demand, so making sure that we're working with our customers, getting it right first time, and obviously reducing costs in that way. So those have very much been investor save areas. If I go then into the capital, and it's all me, but this is all based on the IT side of things, and this is obviously all documented out in your packs later on. But just to give you an idea, there's actually what was already in the budget. This is actually £550,000 less than what was there, so we've managed to claw back some savings in this area. But what we do have in there, we feel is essential. A lot of this is about investing to save, and a lot of it's to do with security as well. So certain things, if we don't do them, for example, we're part of the public services network that allows us to connect in with things like the NHS, DWP. And we have to have a certain level of security and allow us to do that. So that's where a lot of the investment goes, to make sure that we're compliant with that, which allows us to run our services effectively. Then if we go into the resource and assets area, I was just having a little debate with Graham before this meeting. Actually, the very top one is down as Clive, which is income generation from solar farms. I think Clive, Imogen and I can all wrestle for that one, because it sort of fits across all our areas: assets, finances, and renewable energy. But obviously we've had that item come here, with that income generation already. That came, no, it wasn't this committee, it came to the management committee where the business case was scrutinised, but I think some of you were on that committee and looked at that. And then where am I with this one? It's capital. It is the renewable energy infrastructure projects and energy reduction projects. So that is looking at other projects to bring in renewable energy and income in pretty much a similar way that we're looking at Barkham Solar Farm, subject to obviously business cases being put forward and approved in that way. That was a whistle-stop tour. Have I got every line there?
You haven't.
There's a few.
Okay, so we've got Pauline, then Laura, and then Chris. Pauline.
Start with the IT ones. Your removal of telephony lines for when Teams telephony is live. Where's the cost of that? Because Teams telephony has a cost to it in terms of the licenses. Is there a cost missing, or is that netted off, or what?
Yeah, that's the removal of it, but she's asking about the cost of it. So, Glyn, we've got you online, haven't we?
Hey everyone. Yeah, hi Pauline. So essentially it is the net cost. So we're moving getting rid of our ISDN connections essentially, and we're replacing them with SIP telephony. So it's significantly cheaper, and it's going to save us 70 grand a year on year.
Okay, so it's net, that's great. And the second question I had on IT was Microsoft E5 licenses on capital summary, page 1. I'm surprised they're capital for a start, if that's what that line is, because they're not an asset. You can't depreciate it, as far as I'm aware. It's a license cost. So I'd like to ask why it's capital, but also, is that the whole cost of E5, or is that an increase in the E5 licenses? If it is an increase, why?
So we would let Glyn come in. We're just discussing this, but Glyn can put it more eloquently than me.
If you don't want me to butt in, so just tell me. In terms of we're based on a ramp license at the moment, Pauline. So basically, what Microsoft do is E5 is expensive because it's basically everything they've got within their kind of their software house essentially. So they basically give you a 4-year deal to allow you to adopt all the technology within the suite, and at the end of the 4 years you can do a review basically to look at whether you're using it, and then you can scale back down to E3 with add-ons, or you keep using E5. In terms of why it's capitalized, I'd need to refer to finance colleagues essentially, but my belief is the regulations allow us to do it because of the term of the contract, because it's over 1 year essentially, but we'd need to kind of get clarity on that from finance for you.
Yeah, Chairman, I guess I'm one of the finance guys. Thanks, Glenn. Yeah, we run this through our specialist capital team, and they obviously look at the regulations and what qualifies, and they are convinced based on the regulations that it can be because of its duration. Yeah, Glyn was right.
I know you know more about finance than I do, but it's a regular annual cost, so I'm surprised. So, the question about scaling back from E5 to E3, I've never found anybody who manages to scale back from E5 to E3. Once you get into E5, you get addicted to E5 and you never ever scale back. So I'll tell you later. So I'm just wondering how much assumption in here there is for scaling back, or is this just assuming E5 will go on forever and you'll be able to negotiate a better deal at the end of it?
Well, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Glyn, but what we've actually got forecast in subsequent years implies that we're keeping E5, but it's something that we can review. But Glyn, probably want to give a better answer than that. Okay, while Glyn unfreezes, my understanding is that the figures that we've got subsequently are assuming E5, and then we can have those discussions as we look through this.
Sorry, I was a bit flippant, Chris. E5 are usually sort of full fat apps that operate on your PC rather than having web apps with limited functionality and all that sort of stuff. And you'll have the phone technology potentially could be part of E5 as well, plus more applications. So you get more. But the trouble is, once people get more, they never want to give it up.
Right, Laura.
Thank you. I just want to know more about the effective use of council-owned community spaces, CER2, because I want to know what that means exactly. It talks about a community-run model, so I didn't know if that meant that we'd be potentially co-owning our buildings and spaces with others in the community and companies and charities potentially.
So this is something very early ideas at the moment. So exactly what we envisage it looking like, we don't know yet. So we're exploring this, but I mean, for example, could we be getting in could we be having more decentralized services from the council, for example, and utilizing those services out in some of our buildings like libraries, for example? Could we be getting in other organisations, partner organisations, to operate out of those sites as well? Could we look at, I know the Shinfield Micro Library, they've been getting some volunteers in to help there. We need to explore these options, because for a lot of our community spaces, the operating model in the financial situation we're in is not going to be sustainable. But we want to ensure that we have those community spaces, particularly in cost of living crisis. So it's looking at partnering, but we're exploring those options at the moment.
And 150,000 is quite sizable and specific. And I wondered if, although it's still being explored, whether we knew which buildings, which things we could look at, if there was any more specifics behind that 150,000.
I don't think we've got to that stage yet. So we're actually having a community strategy being developed, and that's going to feed in with things like libraries, for example. We can even look at what, the requirements from safety for spaces. There's all sorts of different things we can do. We haven't got the specifics yet. It's a very round figure because we haven't got to that stage of anticipating exactly what this will look like yet. But we know that we do need to find savings in those community assets. So it's something to work towards.
David.
Thank you, Chair. So I was looking at CER1, the savings on mobile phones. Firstly, £56,000 seems like a lot of mobile phones. Even by my family standards, that's a lot of phones. So I was just wondering how many that sort of represents. But on a more serious point, elsewhere, on CER7, we're talking about spending a lot of money as part of an effort to retain talented staff. Have you consulted with staff about this process of the proposal to remove mobile phones? And does it risk actually demotivating staff, putting them under greater pressure, and ultimately maybe being a straw that sort of breaks the camel's back and causes people to leave?
So when I first met with Glenn to talk about this, we talked about reducing mobile phones, and that figure is 50%, I believe, unless that's changed, Glenn, but it was 50% when we first spoke. We've got to a stage where there's so many more mobile phones being used by staff than are actually needed. There are certain teams that are going to require them, for example, those that work in social care, ASB team and places like that. But there's a number of staff that actually don't need their phones in order to do their jobs. We do realise that there will be some pushback because people have got very used to having it, but we have to find savings, and these are a luxury item that aren't required by everybody. And with the introduction of Teams telephony, there is no requirement for many staff that have them now. I'm sure Glenn would like to expand a bit further, but they are a luxury, especially when we were investing in Teams telephony now. But Glenn, you're back.
I am sorry, everyone. Quite ironic. Someone from IT freezing. We're battling with Netflix and streaming at home at the moment, so I've asked them to all come off of it. So it's based on a 50% reduction, and our view is that when we have Teams telephony fully embedded, which we will have done by the end of this financial year, that opens up bring your own device. So essentially people can use their personal phones to pick up a council number, essentially. Appreciate that's going to be a different way of working for people, and we're just going to need to work with our colleagues to kind of like sell the benefits of it. We're not going to kind of push people down that avenue straight away. We're going to kind of work to kind of win their hearts and minds on it. And it's similar to what other councils have done in this area. And other corporate companies, they don't even give mobile phones, a lot of them. They just give someone a SIM card and say, stick it in what device you want to use.
Yeah, and I appreciate the simplicity of the saving. I think that's obvious. And yes, we're taking it as read. We all need to save money. But the point I was trying to make was we're spending money elsewhere to try and retain staff. And it was just, again, a question of balance, whether by saving a few quid here, we actually put at risk some of the other savings or the value of other expenditure we're making further down the line.
Before Graham comes in, I was just going to say, I mean, if we're at the stage that it's only a mobile phone that keeps people working here, there's probably other issues. So that's, I mean, no, we obviously do need to work with people on this, but if it's simply that is keeping them here, that's possibly a concern. But Graham wants to come in. Sorry, I got the mic.
Thanks. My point was, I think staff are becoming very aware of the tough financial environment we're in, and realise that we have to cut our cloth, and this is quite straightforward from my perspective. And I've already said to Glyn's team that I'm quite happy to lead the way on this and just have one phone that does all the work, as opposed to having two, utilising the new technology. So if I'm happy to lead the way, I'm sure others will see what we all need to do to balance our books.
Okay, moving on to Laura. Oh, you've got it. Okay, linked item, go on then.
Sorry. Just following on from that, I agree with you. It's something that is increasingly becoming uncommon, people providing phones. I just wondered if you'd thought about the business continuity aspects of relying completely on Teams, and what the business continuity was if Teams stops working, which it does from time to time. And secondly, the security aspects potentially of personal emails and that sort of stuff, which seems to be quite common on the news at the moment. So just a couple of observations. I think it's the right thing to do. And roughly how many phones is that?
Glyn, you'll need to come in on both those questions. Got a bit technical.
No, that's okay. So in terms of phones, so essentially because of COVID, we've got virtually all of our staff have a mobile phone, essentially. So across the estate, we've got about 1,400 mobile phones, and about 1,000 of those are smartphones. So as you can imagine, a smartphone has to be replaced every sort of 3 years. That's a big significant cost for us to kind of maintain moving forward. In terms of the security side of things, we have got a mobile access management policy which gets applied to devices. So that wraps around basically the Microsoft environment. So that will kind of basically contains Wokingham data on a personal device. But you're right, Pauline, we do need to kind of go away and look at the kind of the security side of things and probably the business continuity. I know within individual service area business continuity plans, they have like contact registers and ways to kind of contact people through kind of like different sort of WhatsApp groups or kind of other kind of messaging channels. So we need to kind of think about that more, I suspect.
Thank you.
Okay, Laura.
Thank you. My question is about the removal to apprenticeship posts, CER3. I know these are vacant posts already, but I just wanted to check that the council is dedicated to keeping apprenticeships across the board, because it is so important to enable lots of people, talented people, to get into local government. So I just want to check this was an unusual one rather than a culture across the board.
That was the exact same question when this was proposed to me, actually, because obviously having apprenticeships is really important. You know, I think we can all agree that we do a great job with the LGA National Graduate Programme here and having people come through that. But obviously the apprenticeship side of things as well is fundamental, and this is not part of the norm, because I had those exact same questions, but there really is no one in those posts at the moment. So, but there are other apprenticeship schemes that are going on.
Al, then I've got Chris, and I've got Chris.
I mean, have any sort of open source solutions been looked at here? I mean, I know you're looking at Drupal, which is an open source framework for the website. I mean, you know, there's potentially a lot of money to be saved, perhaps using open source rather than paying it all to Microsoft.
That'll be one for you, Glyn.
Have we looked at open source? Not in terms of collaboration tools, no. I mean, we are subject to kind of procurement regulations, so we can't just go and buy anything without it being kind of anti-competitive. We do have a kind of a strict code of compliance, essentially, around what tools we can and should be using from central government. And, you know, the other kind of viable platform out there is like the Google platform, essentially. And that does kind of come with sort of compromise. For like Hackney, for example, they had a cyber attack, and that was cited as because, you know, there was a vulnerability on the Google side of things. And in all honesty, most local authorities just use Microsoft. It's what people are familiar with, what they use, and using kind of open source stuff as a productivity tool. I think our staff would struggle with that, to be honest.
Okay, moving on to Chris B.
Thank you. Thank you. There's a general question. Looking at the current financial year, if there have been savings or unexpected savings or unexpected growth in certain areas, are these factored into 23-24 currently?
Yeah, this is in the context that always next year's budget is an iterative, ongoing process, and therefore all of the growth and savings identified at the time we produced what I call lockdown 1, which is these figures here, are factored in, and any adjustments to next year's budget arising from changes in this year will be brought back to this committee. So we have effectively an audit trail of a point in time when we created the summary with the 4 million gap, and then any changes. But yes, the everyday things occur in the revenue monitoring, and some things give rise to an increased pressure next year, and some things will be beneficial next year.
Thank you. Can I just ask a question about, I can't find the reference now, but the new website, is it policy to maximise advertising revenue from the new website? Is there a savings bit in here? I don't know if there is an estimate how much you might get from that.
We've not discussed advertising on the website. Lynn?
Hey, so this is kind of a little bit of history. So we used to do advertising on the council website, and I believe we kind of got rid of it because the income was so little, it wasn't worth the effort. But that might have changed. So it's definitely something we should look at in terms of an opportunity moving forward. So we'll take that one away.
Okay, so that's a good question.
It's something we'll take away and discuss, Glenn, and with the digital team. So thank you for that.
Chris.
Yes, back to the mobile phones. The logical time to reduce is at contract renewal. When's the next contract renewal due?
So our contract with our current mobile phone provider, that will runs out actually at the start of next year. So what we're intending to do is we won't renew that for like a 4-year period. We'll just be doing that on a year-by-year basis so that we can reduce and scale back accordingly until we reach like a natural point.
Thanks.
And David.
Yeah, on CER2, which is effective use of council and community spaces, just a point of clarity just for my benefit. When we're talking about exploring opportunities to engage community partners, presumably we mean voluntary groups, charities, not-for-profit organisations, as opposed to commercial outsourcing?
I think that's the intention, but it's certainly something that can be explored. As I say, we're in the process, early stages of exploring this at the moment. So I'll make a note and take that back to discuss with Jackie.
Ollie.
Thank you. You made me think of something, Chris. Laptops and that sort of stuff. What's your refresh cycle at the moment? And is there any option to extend that a bit?
Glenn will come in on that, but it is something we're looking at because obviously we have to make sure that we are compliant with the public services network as well, to make sure that they're updated. So it can only be stretched so much, but we have looked to do what we can there. But I'll let Glenn come in on the specifics.
Yeah, so typically we work on a 3 to 4 year refresh cycle, but we're looking to move that to 4 to 5 years. What we've got to bear in mind is that, so when we do tech refreshes, so when we move to Windows 10, for example, not all staff got a new laptop. They got a recycled one from someone who handed their kit back. So with Windows 11 coming around, we're going to have to do the same thing. So some of the stuff on our estate is just not going to be able to handle Windows 11, which we're going to have to upgrade to for a security point of view. So typically we're working on a 4 to 5 year refresh rate. But to be honest, with COVID, we've got some people out there who've got laptops who are 5 to 6 years of age. So our policy is, at the moment, if it's not broken and we don't have to change it, we won't change it.
Thank you. That sounds eminently sensible.
I'm going to jump in on that question there, because one of the things I looked at was that you've got 450 laptops at £750, which strikes me as rather expensive. Just wondering if you'd considered Chromebooks.
Have we considered Chromebooks? We haven't. They wouldn't be able to run the kind of line of business applications we've got. So a lot of them are what we call sort of fat clients, where they kind of actually need to work on a Windows environment. Obviously, with things like Windows as a service and stuff that's emerging, we can start to look at that. In terms of the cost of the laptop, it's not £750 dead on for a laptop cost. That's an average cost for a laptop. So we've got a number of officers out there who have different work styles. So if you're a light laptop user, you get a cheaper laptop essentially. But if you're a power user, so someone who's a developer or someone in finance, they have a really, really powerful laptop which costs way more than £750. So it's kind of a bit of an average. And also our field workers have tablets which have a load of peripherals, so like pens, special mice and all that sort of stuff, which pushes the cost of those up over £750. In terms of how we buy laptops, we've actually got access to a benchmarking tool. So we basically put in that we want 100 laptops of this make and model, and it tells us what the cost price is at any one point in time, that we can then go and buy it from a wholesaler. And we typically buy them at the kind of wholesale price plus 3%, which is kind of like the market standard essentially. So yeah, 750 quid is the average. And the price fluctuates in line with the life cycle of devices. So as something's new at the start of its life cycle, it's expensive, and then it over the 4-year period, the sort of price sort of drops away.
Okay, thank you. My advice to you as a team is to look into that market.
Yeah.
I am aware of products where you do not need to have stuff run locally, so it's cloud-based, but it's actually a lot better than running the application in the browser. You get a desktop in the browser, which actually would do the job.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we're starting to look at things like Windows as a service. That's one of the things that we are looking to pilot next year, which means that you can access Windows on anything with an internet connection. So if you could access it on your mobile phone if you really wanted to. We have in local government, though, got a lot of old legacy applications which we've got to get rid of and move away from. They just simply won't work on anything other than a Windows laptop. But yeah, it's something we will look at.
Okay, thank you. Pauline?
Final idea just to chuck in the mix. I did a bit of reselling of old kit and made quite a lot of money out of it. When we did some refreshes, do you get money back from tablets and things that you sell back?
Yeah, we do. So we have a contract in place where we basically give the kit goes back. A bit like what you can do with your mobile phone. We don't get huge amounts of money. One of the questions we get is like, could we donate the kit to people, for example? Unfortunately, that's not something we can do because of the licensing agreement we've got on the actual kind of device. We'd have to basically wipe the device and give it away with no operating system. But we do get a small amount of residual money from like mobile phones and old devices that we give back, essentially, that get ethically recycled.
Good, thank you.
Okay, do you have any more questions for Sarah? Oh, Chris.
Just have one on the same topic. Schools are out there buying stuff all the time. Is there no way of recycling the old equipment from the council back into the schools?
Yeah, when it's something that we would like to be able to do, but unfortunately we're not able to do it because of our licensing agreement around the operating system. It's something we can work with Microsoft on to kind of express it, but they've been quite sort of firm on that we're not able to do it. Essentially, we're not allowed to pass things over to other parties. Essentially.
Yeah, the issue is you'd have to give them the Microsoft license as well, which might cost you a couple $100 a year. And
yeah,
we did.
Yeah, we did look at it, you know, at the start of COVID, about whether we could kind of give it to school kids, you know, who are home learning, and literally we'd have to strip the laptop off. We'd basically have to give them something that when they turned it on, they got a black screen. Then they have to buy the operating system themselves, all their antivirus. In all honesty, it's cheaper to go to PC World and just buy a cheap device off the shelf, or a Chromebook, for example.
Okay, any other questions on? Oh, Shirley.
Make a point on that. I thought that that Microsoft offered they're like really special rates for students and schools for operating systems. So I'm not sure that is a stumbling block to offering them to schools or to community groups or something like that. Just a thought.
We'll go and take it away. My belief though is that that's more around the Microsoft 365 estate, so things like Word and things like that, not the actual operating system, because that's basically locked down to the laptop in some cases and the specific chip on the laptop. But we will take it away and look at it.
Okay, so it sounds like we're done with Sarah. Look around, no more nods, so I think we're done with you, Sarah. Thank you.
So,
Oh, sorry.
well, I was just going to say,
Graham.
Chairman, other than IT, which we had a lot of great ideas, and getting the accountants to revert back to their calculators, is there anything else in Sarah's remit that she covered there that you think there might be worth exploring in terms of reducing costs or generating additional income?
A lot of savings, haven't I?
Okay. Oh, Pauline.
Well, it was really a question. I'm not sure whether the solar farm projects are under you, are they?
We were just discussing this earlier, so actually where they sit, because renewable energy, yes, finance, Imogen, assets, Clive. I mean, the Barkham Solar Farm, Imogen and I are sitting on there with our climate emergency and finance hats on the project board. But yeah, so have you got any specific questions on that?
I just wondered if we could have more and quicker.
You just wondering what, sorry?
More and quicker.
Oh, yeah, so, yeah. No, we are making progress with a couple of sites, and obviously looking at what we can do on council and property as well. So we're powering through that. Yeah, so we are trying to bring things forward and get them online as soon as possible.
So are these already in these papers and already in the base load, or
they are? So the future sites that we've currently got in here will be smaller than Barkham Solar Farm, which is why they're not as much. It's in the capital of the resource and assets area. I'm trying to remember. I've got so yeah. No, I've got so no. It's just to remember which I cover so many different areas. It gets confusing as to where everything sits. As it's yeah. So it's on that slide. No, that's revenue. So yeah. So it is. Keep going.
I understand that the biggest delay is on getting the connection to the infrastructure, to the electricity infrastructure.
So it's once you agree with the district network operator and getting that on board. We've obviously tried to bring that forward with the Barkham Solar Farm, but we can now learn from what we've done with Barkham Solar Farm, and we are bringing these forward as quickly as possible. Yeah. It's in here. So.
Okay, moving on to I guess Rachel.
Yeah, this page, Chairman, is Rachel's. Rachel?
Rachel, are you here?
She was online. Rachel, Bishop Firth.
I'm just giving her a call.
Oh, she says I'm here but can't speak.
Oh,
That's not good.
you're there.
Okay, so let's move on to Clive's section while Rachel can see if she can fix up her microphone.
I'll put you on loud.
In and there's a back square in the middle of it. Can somebody else go first? What I'll do is I'm going to leave and come back on.
Yeah. No, that's not good enough. So we'll go with Clive while Rachel sorts herself out. Microphone, please, Clive.
Growth bid for the corporate change team, and this used to be funded in the 22, 23, 23, 24 budgets as a special item, but we're just making it permanent now.
We're talking about page 85. That's the detail.
Sorry. Yeah. Page 85.
Yeah. On page 85.
Yeah.
There is one on the previous page.
Chairman, Councillor Norman Jorgensen is rightly pointing out there is one on the previous page. So if you just let me flick through. So this is the first one. with Clive on it. So Clive, if you just touch on this one.
What's that one? The Borough News.
That's it. Savings.
Yeah, sorry, missed that. Yeah, so we're looking at reducing them from 3 to 1, which will make a £30,000 saving for the next few years.
Let Clive go through his stuff, then ask the questions.
Yep. Then CER7. This is,
Sorry, we were interrupted at CER5, so can you just do CER5? Sorry.
I'd finish that. Okay. Yeah, so this is a corporate change management team, and we used to fund this work as a special item in the financial year 22-23 and 23-24, but we're not doing it as a special item anymore. We're making it as a permanent item. Okay. And then R7. This is another part of organisational change, and this was originally £1.5 million, and we have reduced it to £1.2 million. So we've made a saving there of £300,000. Do you want to add anything on that, Graham, or is that enough?
I think I'll come in if there's any questions, Clive, at the end.
And then solar panels, I think Sarah has dealt with. You've got any further questions on those? The Carnival Hub Estates Management, this is keeping the area around the Carnival Hub tidy. This was originally £50,000, but we have been able to reduce that down now to £20,000.
Sorry, Clive, did you cover RAR2, rationalisation process of corporate accommodation?
Did I not? Sorry. Sorry, Pete.
Page 92, effectively.
Page 92.
92, yeah, RAR2.
Yep, this is rationalisation of our corporate accommodation. So we are looking at making changes, certainly here in Shoot End, and looking at all of the other property assets that we have across the council. Which was the next one. 10, I think I covered. 11. Yes, this is where we have been looking at different projects and doing feasibility studies for them, and then deciding that we didn't want to go ahead with those projects, but the cost of the feasibility studies had to go somewhere. So this is where that £150,000 is. So it's a bit of tidying up, really, of optimistic feasibility studies. $17. This is a fairly difficult area. Market conditions have got very, very difficult, certainly over the last 6 months or even a bit longer. The whole of the retail environment is very, very difficult, and what was anticipated as income that we could achieve a few years ago is now not achievable. So even though we are very open to working with retailers, and we're trying to find more retailers to come to Wokingham all of the time, it's going to get more and more challenging. Thanks to Celia's school. St Cecilia's School was meant to open last year, and the £100,000 that is in the budget for that is basically for looking after it, security and stuff like that. Are there any more? I think that's it. Got one on the capital one. This is RAC 35, and this is for ongoing maintenance, repairs of roofs, redecoration, that sort of thing. And it's the same as what I've done in previous years. Pardon? Sorry. This is what the council approved 3 or 4 years ago to spend 200 million on commercial properties, and we're not going to be using the whole 200 million. We can use some of this 200 million that was approved by the council for care homes and solar farms. We won't be looking at commercial property. It'll just be for projects that offer the benefit of the community, such as care homes, solar farms. I think that's it.
Okay, so we'll open the floor to questions. I know Chris Baring was first. I've got Pauline, Laura, Norman.
There was page 87. I couldn't understand the cumulative movements figures, which go down from 1,200 to 300. They go up to 1,500.
Graham, look at that.
Just restate your question there, Chris.
Yes, page 87, the cumulative movements from 20 to 23. It's 1,200 and then 300. I'll go backwards.
Yes, I think where this gets confusing is where it's the difference between a growth and a special item. So a special item is basically saying we'll get £1.2 million for that particular year, 23-24, and then that disappears, and then you get a new amount for 300k in 24-25. From the cumulative perspective, what it's saying is it's not going 1.2 million up to 1.5 million. It is actually dropping down to 300k. So, and the reason why it's dropping down to 300k in year 2 is because there is a growth item that appears in year 2 that of about 800k, and if you add the two together, you keep to about the 1.2 million. The difference is we are now putting 860k of it into our ongoing base budget. leaving just 300k as a one-off amount.
Okay, I don't know how you write the spreadsheet like that.
Okay, finish, Chris? Yeah, Pauline.
That was one of my questions because it completely confused me how the total budget for the activity could be 320 grand, but it was 1.2 million in the top line. So I was a bit confused by the whole thing. So could you just explain it again? What you're saying, I think, is that you're putting 800 and odd thousand in the base budget, which is a growth on the base budget, and therefore the special item becomes 300.
That's absolutely correct. So year one is just a special item of 1.2 million and 0 in the base budget. Year two, you'll see a figure of 860k, I think it was, in, you find it.
Yeah, well, I found it at the time because yeah, I know what you mean.
Where is it now? That was a
think it was
special item. Sorry, the growth, 860k. So you see that growth, 860k. So take 23, 24. There's 0 there in the base budget, but there's 1.2 million is a special item on the following page.
Yeah.
So, but the thing with a special item, you have to put it in specifically as a lump each year, which I think is not very financially prudent because we actually have changed kind of baked as a forever in the way we do business. So what year two tries to do is bring in 860k of the permanency of that 1.2 million to say that is part of our ongoing establishment for change, because we'll always have change, but it recognises 300k of it may just be for that year only.
So why didn't you just scrap the special item in the first year? Why did you have the whole 1.2 in the first year as a special item rather than just having the 300k and putting the rest in the base budget?
Well, the reason for bringing it in year two was year one is considerably more challenging, and that was a hell of an ask to do in.
Why? Surely it's just chocolate, just wooden dollars, just move it from one place to another.
Not entirely. So growth items directly impact on the council tax calculation. Special items are one-off, and we have one-off bits of money and may not directly impact on the council tax calculation if we have sufficient one-off credits.
Got you. Okay. So
I'll move on to Laura.
yeah, can I just ask the second question? I'm just trying to write that down before I forget. Yeah, the second question, which I didn't understand Clive's explanation, was RAR 11. So I think he said that it's writing off feasibilities that aren't going to work, and therefore you want to write them off somewhere, and this is how you write them off. But it's in next year, so why would you put feasibilities that aren't going to work in next year? Surely you just wouldn't do them, in which case you wouldn't have expenditure, in which case you wouldn't have 150 grand in next year.
Okay, yeah, we have very regularly on an annual basis, we have all types of projects we look to explore for all sorts of reasons, whether they're around housing generation, addressing our school, special education, care needs, what have you. And traditionally, we've either been more successful in being able to turn it into a capital scheme and therefore capitalise it, or we've been left with a problem that we've had to address in revenue in year. It's not going to be exactly 150k per annum, but this is our estimate. The level of work that goes on using our staff and buying people in, etc., to explore all sorts of asset opportunities, particularly on strategic council land, and it's creating a revenue fund to then charge the abortive costs to, because we can't capitalise abortive costs. We can only capitalise if it turns out into an asset. So I would say this is a introduction of appropriate prudence into our finances rather than hoping everything's going to be able to be turned into capital.
Thank you, Graham. That makes a lot of sense. So why isn't it in every year rather than just the first one?
It is. It's a growth. This isn't special item. This is a growth. So every year we'll be putting 150k provision for this.
Thank you. So you're assuming every year £150,000 worth of feasibilities won't come off, and then you've got a budget to put them against.
That's correct. It's an average, and of course some years they'll be much higher and some years lower.
Okay, Laura.
Thank you. On the reduction in number of borough news additions from 3 to 1, is the 30,000 incorporating the delivery cost savings as well?
Yeah.
It is. And I'm quite concerned that there's a reduction because, of course, it's a really useful thing to get information to some of the most vulnerable residents that aren't online. So is the thinking to move it into Rachel Bishop Firth's patch, and so should look at more printed items to targeted people who are vulnerable, or is that not the plan at all? Just we're getting rid of it and that's that.
It isn't. We're getting rid of it.
Microphone, please.
It isn't. We're getting rid of it, and that's that. This is being considered because I share some of your reservations that not everybody is online. Not everybody can look at it. So this is just a idea at the moment. I don't know if it will stay there or not.
Can I just throw a comment in with that one? Have you considered working with the Woking Word, which seems to be delivered to everybody and their brother? There's the Woking Word magazine that's delivered to everybody on a... Okay, it's not delivered to everybody. I just assumed it went. I've seen it all over the place.
No. The reason for definitely keeping one of them, if it just happens to be one of them, is that it can go out with a council tax.
Norman, then.
Thanks. I had a couple of questions. The first one goes back to the one we were talking about before, the CER7, which is on page 87 again. I mean, here we're talking about effectively the expenditure on this team, and some of it is become permanent, so you're building it into the budget. Some of it is more transitory, but presumably the transitory part is about change management, and therefore is there not a consequence of that change management work happening that should be feeding through in potential savings, or is that be coming up somewhere else in these budget lines?
Yeah, just to expand on what that covers, includes digital, so the digital team, UX, UI, user experience and something. Yes, user interface, organizational change, PMO, graduates, business analysts, and in some financial support in there. I was trying to get a bit clever and I obviously ran out of steam. So this is considered to be key, particularly the 860 core piece is considered to be key in terms of work across the whole of the council. So it's the adult social care savings efficiency, the children's savings that sit elsewhere in corporate. So it's not just about savings, but it is seen to be an absolutely essential part of the council's machinery to deliver improved effectiveness of service delivery and efficiency of service delivery. And you're absolutely right. Those savings are, let's say, introduced throughout the MTFP. And if this was taken away, you would have the likes of Matt Pope and Helen Watson and probably Steve Moore saying, I can't deliver my saving without the support to do that.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I can see that's core activity and very important for the effectiveness and efficiency of the council running it. Next one was going on to the solar farm one, RAR1. RAR1, yeah, page 91. I just wondered what that 500k represents. What is it?
So do you want me to answer?
Yeah,
Yeah.
see, I'm trying to see.
Oh, sorry. It's that line there. So I'll start, and obviously the councillors can obviously follow on from. Yeah. So it's the 500k income. What this is, and this is obviously using our experience to date on the Barkham Solar Farm and the business case. This is a part year effect of an introduction of a second site in year 2, and this is the net income after all the costs of running the site, insurance, all that business, and the cost of capital financing. So it's the genuine residual income after all revenue costs associated with it. And it's obviously we have the most current business case on Barkham Farm to look at, and I stress this is the part year effect. A full year effect would be somewhat bigger, but it's considered to be the quickest we can get it in. So I do take that point, Pauline, that you made. Can we go as fast? I think Sarah Morgan would tell she's sick of hearing that from me, so she knows that's an imperative.
Okay, thank you. And the third one was on the RAR17, which is page 107, which is like the estate's property pressures. And you mentioned sort of the effect on the retail market. I mean, I just wonder, I mean, it's all part of the overall package of driving footfall into any of the sort of properties, retail properties that we have. So I just wonder, I mean, if we're losing 200k there in this coming year, then that's quite a sizable chunk. Just wonder how we can help businesses to be successful. I mean, it takes me back to the car parking charges, the debate, for example, that, we're disincentivizing people coming into the centres. So, it's I don't want to open up that debate again, but I think that does have an impact. Just the question is, are there other things that we can do to help make sure we've got the thriving town centres?
It is very difficult. You're right. When these forecasts were done several years ago, they were probably thought to be achievable then. But we're now realising, the council is now realising that they are certainly not achievable anymore. And there are many reasons for that. Retail, as you probably realise, is changing considerably over the last few years, with lots more people using the likes of Amazon and buying online, which makes retail more difficult. One of the big problems that there is going to be for retail over the next couple of years is going to be the fact that people have got less money to spend, because they're spending more money on energy costs and they're spending more money on their mortgages. The average mortgage, certainly after today, is going up probably by £500 a month. So for every house with a mortgage, they're taking out £6,000 that those people cannot spend in the local economy. So that those things are going to make it much more difficult. But we will continue, Damon and his team will continue to try to get retailers to come here, to offer them good terms to come here. And if we can get more people, more companies like Sweaty Betty to come here, which is a very good retailer, then that will help to attract other retailers to Wokingham as well.
Okay, David.
A couple of my questions were asked by Norman. I won't repeat them, but I'm just going back to those large number items, the 1.2 million, the 800,000. Now, I was feeling smug earlier on because I actually did understand the way those two items link together. Yeah, but I feel quite a lot less smug because I still don't understand it. We're spending, I mean, we've debated at some length saving 50k on mobile phones. We've agonised over 30k on the communications once every 3 years, and there's 1.2 million here just gone through on a nod. Now that may well be right. I'm not, I don't know because I'm not sat here often enough or long enough to understand it. But in terms of the role of this committee as a scrutiny committee, we seem to be led to the smaller items, and that one's just sort of. Now that may well be right, and I listened intently to what Graham said, and I understand that is clearly a key part of the infrastructure of how the council works. But in maybe for future sessions, not now, we need to have more information about that in advance so we can actually understand the impacts of where that money goes and what it does for us. And above all else, how we actually measure success. Yes, I understand fully that systems improvements will deliver the savings, but I'm not quite sure where actually we see them in one of these sort of charts. I don't mean that to sound as critical as it does, Graham, but it's just from my point of view and new to the process. That's quite a big number to go through with few questions asked other than how it is in these sheets.
I think you're right. I think we should take that on board, Graham. You agree?
I was going to say it's spot on in terms of it's a really big figure, isn't it? And I know sometimes we get absorbed by the smaller ones, and that. So to give you more information around that, such a sizable number, and address those points made, I think it's a really good call. So we'll bring that back to a future meeting.
Pauline.
Thank you. Just to follow on from David's point, I was hoping that was going to come back as part of the breakdown that we've been asking for consultancy, fixed term, headcount, etc., because I'm a little bit worried that we need to ensure that we're not increasing headcount and also increasing consultancy spend and ending up with an expanding organisation that eats more and more and more money just with the. An old boss once said to me, the more people you've got, the more it costs you, and it doesn't necessarily deliver benefits. I think he was right. And I just want to see those figures and want to be assured that we're not employing people to then employ more consultants who then employ more people who then employ more consultants, and it just ratchets up, which is why I've been going on and on and on about wanting to see the data. But my question was about RAC1, which I'm afraid I didn't understand either. I think you said, Clive, and I may have misunderstood because I had to change pens because I ran out of ink, that you were only in future going to spend, it's page 75. 75. Maybe you could just explain community investment, RAC1 again, please, just for my benefit.
Sorry, in some of the paperwork, this is incorrectly labelled as Stephen Conway, but you'll see in my slides, which of course have to be right, they've got Clive, and that's right because it's about general asset delivery. So there was, I think about 7 or 8 months ago, we took a revised, what used to be called the property investment policy. We changed to the community investment policy, and that was because we previously had a much more commercial ambition and permission to buy properties like a Waitrose or what have you, and we could borrow off PWLB, and the criteria then was effectively as long as we covered the cost of borrowing plus an additional 2%, it met the criteria, and the powers to make that decision were vested in myself in consultation with various members of the executive. More recently, that became the community investment policy. Most notably, it had to show that there was a benefit for the community as well as a financial return, and they matched the new rules of the PWLB borrowing criteria. And that went to executive and through to council. In total, there was £200 million. This says that there's £93.5 million left, and in accordance with the detail of the BIP template, that money would only be spent if the scheme met two conditions, and that is it covered the costs of borrowing and all other costs, so it made at least break even or a surplus, and it could be demonstrated that it was for the benefit of the community. And an example is a good example, and obviously can't give specifics away, but we may be interested, for example, in the purchase of care home, that type of thing, and if we undertook that and we could save money by self-provision, which therefore made a return through cost avoidance higher than interest costs and all that business, and paying back MRP. It's also for the benefit of the community because it's local provision as opposed to sending people across borders. We would utilise this fund for things like that, and indeed solar farms could meet that criteria as well. So it's only there as a permission under the policy to that extent of money, but the individual approval must meet all those checks and balances under the policy and be enacted by myself in consultation with all those set out in the policy.
Thanks, Graham. So who sets that? Who set that rule? Is that a PWLB rule?
The policy's set by executive, then on to council, but the policy also attaches itself, well, meets the new PWLB lending criteria. So if it didn't, we wouldn't be able to borrow from PWLB, therefore we'd have a policy we couldn't enact.
So
can I just let Clive answer?
Yeah.
I was just going to add that it was pretty clear last year that we were not going to be able to, well, the council was not going to be able to spend money on buying commercial property, couldn't spend outside.
Yeah, I know that.
And John Kaiser was talking about solar farms, care homes, that sort of thing. So this is really just carrying on from last year.
Yeah, I was just trying to understand what was going on. I knew that there'd been a change in the rules and we couldn't buy outside the borough. I could make an argument that says buying a Waitrose would be a public benefit, because having a choice of shops is a public benefit. What has ended you up with that level of spend? You know, if you came across more that could be operated and bought at a profit, could you do it? Or is there something there that says, no, absolutely, you can't go and buy a supermarket because there's rules against it? What I'm trying to get to is it a change of government policy or is it a change of local policy? And how much flexibility have we got?
It's substantially change of national policy, which was introduced sometime in the past year, and that government policy was enacted through PWLB borrowing lending rules, and those rules restricted out of borough. So the rule had to be for the benefit of your community, and it should not be primarily for financial gain. So I would like to use your interpretation, Pauline, but I'm certain I wouldn't get away with it.
Okay, I do have a couple of questions really just based upon the town. We've got existing units which aren't let out, and I presume you're doing them on short hold tenancies. Have you thought of doing a tenancy that could be for a month or a pop-up that just covers the running cost of that building?
Yep. I think a meeting a couple of months ago that we had, we were suggesting to the officers that really we should be looking at some pop-ups because we have a British Legion pop-up. Yeah, but more and more, and that is a possibility. Probably not this year because I think we're too late. But pop-ups are particularly popular around Christmas in a lot of towns. So it is something that the officers are now much more open to.
Sorry, just push more on that point. I like bikes. Is actually go for a pop-up bike store in their pop-up secure biking shop. You'd get footfall and you'd get people using it, and I know someone who wants to do that. So there are capabilities to do that.
Put them in contact with us then.
I've tried and tried.
Have you? All right.
The other concern I have with regards to the town, and maybe this is out of order here, but with the change of Robert Dias and Lloyd's Bank, with the potential demolition of the building that's there, has the council spoken to those two vendors to see if they can be housed within existing properties that the council have?
As I'm aware, that is not even a planning application yet. It's just speculation. So we don't know what the future of those businesses is. So it is just speculation at the moment. So we haven't been approached.
Maybe it's worth approaching. I'm just throwing it out there.
Actually, because there is a possibility that whole area is going to be redeveloped.
Any other questions for everybody? No? Okay. Al, sorry, Al.
I just wanted to add my concern about reducing the number of the borough news. I mean, people like my mother read everything that comes through the door, but they don't go. Well, she is online, but she wouldn't read anything from her local council. So I think, especially if there's a lot of change, I just think communication is and it goes to every single resident. I mean, I think it is important.
It is a very good point, Al. And Laura came up with it as well, and I certainly agree. But we are in very, very difficult times. We've got to save money wherever we can. So I don't know, maybe.
Chris.
On that same topic, what about approaching the parish councils? I mean, Shinfield, we're getting something every month. I don't know how much literature comes out of the parish councils, whether there's an opportunity to put a page in there from the borough.
I know from an experience in Winnersh Parish Council is all online now. They send emails, and I'm not in Hampstead. I don't know.
Microphone, Pete. Next person, please. So I think that Rachel's back. Rachel
Apparently has fixed her microphone. Are you there, Rachel?
I am indeed. I'm sorry about that. It just simply wouldn't let me unmute. So the ones for me are, the first one is an HR spend. So the HR department at Wokingham Borough Council has been through a very tough time the last year or so. They've had extremely high turnover, and they have done a piece of work looking at how they can structure themselves better so that they can then provide better support to the business, and they need some money in order to get them to that place. So that's the first one. The second is equality and tackling poverty, community engagement. We're doing a tremendous amount of work at the moment around the cost of living crisis, and then underlying that the new tackling poverty strategy, and a lot of work around driving inclusion. That means a lot of communication, so you'll have been seeing all of the messages going out about the cost of living crisis, and they need some funding so that they can continue to engage with the community and to get those messages out. Then there is the Easy Read document review by CLASP. That's a really good initiative. They're taking key council documents that members of the public need to read, and they're making sure that they are in English that can easily be read and understood by people with learning disabilities, by people with limited English, for example. And then the final one of mine is the inclusion officer spending. So we had a consultant who did a lot of very good work, who was very involved in setting up the REF. That person has now left us, and we need some money to continue financing inclusion for a limited period of time.
Okay, do you have any questions? Laura?
Thank you, Rachel. I had a question on the Equality and Tackling Poverty Community Engagement, CER8, because I wasn't entirely sure what this covered. Does this cover any staffing costs, or is it purely coordination from the council and the VCS and Hardship Alliance, or is it all mainly communications, and does that include the printed literature that we've talked about before and giving that to the charities and they can help people in crisis with the information?
I don't have a breakdown of the expenditure. I know that it includes the time of the officers who are supporting on that. I don't know if the finance people on the call have got. Does it include any of the actual materials as well?
Hold on, I'm just looking. I think I've got it. Oh, yes, right. Yes, it's 2 people. And it involves comm support around the equality, tackling poverty agenda, writing communications and engagement strategy, and then something else I can't read, but it's 2 people.
Okay, thank you. And I think just as we've touched upon before, I know, Rachel, you're very much agreed with prevention of poverty is really crucial, and with getting rid of those 2 borough news, because there's so much help that the council is offering residents, actually not having it in there when we know there are people who are not online or people who may be, but actually get it through. 30,000 saving isn't actually that much if you can divert someone from being in crisis and turning up needing emergency accommodation. Will that 30,000 be quickly eclipsed? So it's probably worth just taking that offline and having a discussion in the background. And then separately on the inclusion officer, so that's just one inclusion officer at £52,000.
Yes, that's one post.
Okay, and is that for a 2-year fixed term?
Yes, so that's up to 2025.
Okay, and the inclusion team right now, do they just not have anyone in that team at all? Obviously there is an inclusion lead, but there's someone else who want to recruit, so is there just absolutely no one driving the inclusion agenda?
No, when Arif left, he handed the work over to other officers. We do have, we have some funding, but we need funding to take us through into the coming years.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any other questions? Pauline?
Maybe, I'd be interested in understanding what that implementation of the HR target operating model 44,000 is. Just makes me naturally suspicious, Rachel.
Okay. So we will need some consultancy support to get us to that place. I mean, clearly to bring in a new organisation, to do a reorganisation, that takes considerable extra resources. What they're doing is they're taking the department, they're creating new teams within the department which are better structured to serve the organisation. There will be some considerable extra work that will need to be done. So, for example, they need to get the policies rewritten and modernised. That's not been done for quite some while. So there is some considerable additional work to get us to that place.
So how, I mean, maybe it's something that Graham will answer later, but how many people are in the HR department and what are they currently doing if they're not keeping the policies up to date and reorganising their own organisation and they need consultancy to do that? Bearing in mind, HR people are usually pretty good at reorganising organisations because that's generally their core skill set, or it should be.
Okay, so I'll hand over to the finance people in a minute, but there are around 21 people within HR. There's been some very high turnover though, and when you get high turnover, obviously that affects the efficiency of an organisation. So they need somebody to come in to reorganise the team and get them to the place that they should be to be able to deliver to the organisation.
Just leave it with the thought that that's the job of the management of the HR department, and if they're not doing it themselves, we shouldn't need to get consultants in to do that. They should be able to do it themselves. That is a core skill of HR in my view.
Yeah.
Do you want me to comment or
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's a blend of both. So it's fair to say under the 21st Century Council, we pared back HR to its absolute bare minimum on the predication of a very, very high level of self-sufficiency. In reality, that was overly ambitious, and therefore it's been under-resourced. In addition, there has been quite a churn in that area of staff at all levels, and it needs bolstering up, which it has been through previous years' budget. There was a growth bid in previous years, and it's also recognised there is a hump in the work in terms of getting on top of key processes, streamlining and what have you. There is a significant addition to the team being the AD of HR, who's soon to join, but it's also recognised there needs to be some also one-off brought-in support to address the current degenerated state into a much more effective functioning HR service with OD at its heart and being able to be the eyes and ears of the organisation. I can see you shaking your head, Pauline, but it does need both the ongoing capacity and some expertise input for a short period of time to help us address the current state.
And I think I would add to that in my role, and I am an HR manager in my day job, I have very often been involved in coming into organisations which are going through a period of turmoil, where the HR department does need to be improved, and I have never seen that successfully done without bringing additional outside resources into the organisation, because you always have there's additional workload in getting the department to the places it needs to be so that you can deliver to the organisation.
I think my fundamental question is how much of that job is actually the core job that they should be doing all the time. You shouldn't have to bring external people in to do things like keeping policies up to date. But I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I'll leave that one offline because yeah, I think there's a debate to be had there. But Shirley.
I'm probably being a bit dim here, but I can't understand why that's under Rachel's portfolio.
It's because I part of what I do is as well as in, equality, inclusion, and fighting poverty. I'm also chair of the personnel board.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Rachel? No, I'm seeing no. So I think say thank you, Rachel. We'll move on to Imogen.
Oh, it's my turn. Right, okay. I start on page 70 if everybody wants to get there. Are we all there? Okay. First thing I've got on my list here, we've got, this is revenue bid savings. So first thing on my list here is we've got the benefit realisation from commercial activities. This is where there have been consultants making changes to commercial strategy in order to provide efficiencies, and they are implementing things that have worked well with other councils, so therefore there is a saving to be had. We've got then contracts and commissioning reviews, which is a review of our procurement system which was carried out by SITFA, again making savings for the business. We've got the early payment program, which I'm reliably told that it is when we pay something early, we get sometimes get a rebate on that. Paperless democratic meetings. This is the expected savings from moving to things like modern gov and electronic format of documents rather than printing them all the time. Fun? I don't know if it includes the planning committee, because I understand the planning committee. Obviously, you've got some large documents and things, but obviously they've got an idea of how to make some savings by going paperless, but I'm pretty sure it's not everything. Increased income from collection improvements, the collection fund, which is by the council tax collection team, which is where they've improved their efficiency on collecting business rates and council tax. The business support efficiency program, I'm not 100% sure what that is, but I'm pretty sure that they've obviously made some savings. I don't know if Graham wants to. Pardon?
Deletion of a post.
Oh, it's a deletion of a post, is it? Okay, thank you. The Treasury Management Review, which is improvements to cash flow and borrowing and lending. So they've been reviewing that and they've managed to save a good 250,000, it looks like. Reduced costs for external audit due to improved quality assurance. Well, that only goes in 3 years from now, 30,000. Review and benefits automation. This means people can do more things online and it's automated so they don't have to interact with people. So automating that, applying for benefits. Penalty charges, non-provision of information, council tax benefits. This is basically to do, yes, these are the penalty charges when you're not paying your council tax, I believe. Non-provision of information. Ah, okay. But it's only 25,000. The increased court costs, council tax and business rates. Obviously, if people are refusing to pay their council tax or their business rates and they go to court, these are increasing the fees to those who could pay and have refused to pay. So that's what that one is. Right, moving on to revenue bids growth. Moving up my screen. I've got here increasing demand support through council tax relief scheme, cost of living pressures. Now that is 100,000. This is the people who are on the lowest incomes in the borough. They get a reduction on paying their council tax. They don't have to pay the full whack of council tax. So what we've done is that we've increased this with the consumer price index, which is the same as universal credit has done. And it means that we have to put another 100,000 in that fund to support it at the same level with the inflation increases into it. So that's what that is. These are the growths. Insurance premiums, well, obviously, everything's going up, including insurance premiums. So there's 150,000 put in there to cover that. The payment system, I gather that's an IT system that is being updated, which improves, the way we do payments. Governance salaries. I understand that this includes a project manager who's been working on the boundary review, and it also includes part of Andrew Moulton's salary as well, apparently. It apparently has not been covered properly by Democratic Services. So, and the legal services one, that is to do with the fact that we've broken the relationship with, well, they broke it with us, Royal Borough of Windsor and Maidenhead. And so now they are short one solicitor in there, I believe, so there's cancellation of the shared legal services, RBWM. So we're one man down in terms of somebody to deal with contract renewals within the council. So they're asking for 78,000 to cover that. I think that is the last of my stuff. Oh no, down here, sorry. On the capital summary, we have capital. This is a lump of money that's been put there to cover any potential inflation costs within that year for construction. We've also got another £1 million going in the contingency. So this is all on the capital side of things. And property maintenance and compliance, I'm assuming that's money to cover any increases in property maintenance that might come along. And I believe that is it for me.
Okay, opening up for questions. Pauline, Shirley. Pauline, Shirley, first of all. And Norman. Pauline.
Thank you very much. Starting at the top, is that council tax relief scheme 100 grand just because council tax is going on and they're going up, and therefore the relief will go up as well? Or is that more people claiming it?
We've not increased the number. We've basically kept it the same scheme as it was before, but we've increased the amount of money in it for to cover, because it's to cover the consumer price index. So it's going up by a small percentage, and to keep it at the same level, we have to put 100,000 in it.
I didn't understand that. Sorry.
Graham, could explain.
Yeah, absolutely. Imogen's absolutely right. It's not a change to the scheme in any way, but it's a reflection of increasing call on the scheme, and the fact, of course, that the council tax will go up, and therefore the relief, the percentage relief calculation goes up.
Insurance premiums, same boring question as before. Self-insurance and excesses, have we looked at those again?
Yes, I know we have an email exchange, and there was a specific one on being self-insured around particular items, and I haven't got the response to that, but I'm following it up. But we do have quite a sizable excess, which obviously helps us keep the premiums down, but it does mean we have to have a fairly sizable insurance fund in order to be there to cover the excess. But that specific item of covering small items, I've yet to bottom out.
Okay, thank you. And legal services, if we're breaking with Royal Borough and Windsor and Maidenhead, which I knew was on the cards, don't we also have less cost as well as the extra solicitor, or were we getting it cheap? Because I always thought Royal Borough and Windsor and Maidenhead, the way it was talked about, was that they were getting a better deal than we were. So is that not true?
No, that's a complete myth. We did extremely well.
That's why
out of both property and legal, and so it wasn't just an economies of scale issue. There was quite a sizable contribution on top that we managed to lever in.
Yeah. And
I gather some staff stayed with RBWM.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole team downsized, and staff transferred between the two organisations. So there wasn't an attempt to try to be as lean as we could. It's just those factors I said.
And the paperless democratic meetings, I think you can see by this meeting that this would not work electronically. I can guarantee it, and I'm a bit of a geek.
I don't think the plan is to go completely paperless. And I understand that why, and I understand the concerns, but I think they're trying to get us to be more paperless, and they think they can save £11,000, I think it is, by doing it. So.
Good. So as long as we've got your assurance, you're not going to start trying to make us do these things paperless.
No, I mean, and I understand with planning documents and things.
Yeah, it just wasn't going to work.
Callum's going to make a point.
Go on, Callum.
So Pauline, it could be, there's lots of ideas. One of the ideas, for example, is it might be that rather than we print agendas for every member, it might be an on request thing. So you might say, I want agendas for community and corporate, but I don't need one for personnel board, for example. So there's lots of different ways of doing it, but it's not going to be a blanket. We're not printing anything ever. Definitely not.
Well done, Callum.
That's a really good point. We changed our template from blue on white on blue to blue on white and saved an absolute fortune in toner. That's yeah. And easier to write on as well.
Okay, we've got the point. I was going to make exactly the same point. So other questions?
I'm a strong believer in being as accessible as possible and things. Some people don't need the paper and some people do. So if that's a way of saving a bit of money, that's fine by me.
Okay. So, Shirley.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, page 96, RAR6, this further improvements in the collection of council tax. I just wonder if that's being a bit optimistic, given the current climate, that the saving here that we...
What was that page?
Page 96, RAR6, savings.
96.
Further improvements in council tax collection has enabled an increased contribution from the collection fund. And I'm just wondering if that is going to be sustainable given the cost of living crisis and we may have more people. We've just been talking about putting more money in the fund for council tax.
I'll let Graham speak, but I get the information as to the council tax defaults and things like this. It's gone up a little bit, but not significantly so. And people are still paying their council tax, which is good. Yeah, at the moment. But I'll let Graham answer.
Well, two things by way of assurance. One is, yes, at the moment, the collection is actually higher than it has been in previous years and previous recent years. And actually last year was a record collection ever. Again, it was still quite a tough year. I'm not saying the years aren't getting tougher, but also in addition to that reassurance this is also about drawing down some of the surplus that's in the collection fund that's been accumulated over years. So even if we plateaued or reduced slightly, we could still manage to draw down in a managed way some surplus, which is...
Right. So this is kind of like some money that you've got in the bank from previous years that you're kind of holding back.
That type of thing. We have to run a collection fund for both business rates and council tax, so it doesn't directly come into the general fund in the way most other things do, like car parking income or leisure. So it's about managing those accounts and teasing things out in a responsible way.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Just interrupt you there, Shirley. I was just looking at the time. It's 12 minutes past 10 by my watch and was due to finish at 10:30, but we may have a further discussion. So I'm just seeing the appetite to move us on to, say, close at 11, but hopefully get it done by then.
We'll just...
Yeah.
Can we just talk fast?
Yeah, talk fast.
Shirley, I understand where you're going, and that we do monitor the business rates and the council tax rates. And one of the things we are watching for to see if there is a large number of people starting to default, then we know we've got a big problem. It's our way of seeing what's going on.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. And on page 98, I'm assuming that this waffle about different things is actually a loss of a member of staff or two part-time members of staff. Is it? I think that's where the saving is coming from. So we're automating. I'm going to sound like a Luddite here, but are we automating and getting rid of two people?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Is it two? But yes, it is automation to reduce staffing. That is correct.
not for the staff members that are losing their jobs, of course. But never mind, hopefully there'll be money to give them council tax benefits, so it'll be all right.
It doesn't necessarily mean people are losing jobs, because obviously it's incumbent on all of us to try to keep posts vacant to give ourselves flexibility, which sometimes goes into this interim position. So one of the reasons for bringing in interim cover is it gives you flexibility to end that interim and do something like this.
Fine, thank you. And last one, number 99, this increase in court fees, and it's quite categorically saying that it's for people who don't want to pay their council tax or business rates. I mean, I've had a resident recently who's fallen on very hard times, and he's had to pay court costs, and he wasn't a won't pay, he was a can't pay. So I just worry that this increase of it's quite difficult to separate out the won't pays from the can't pays.
I understand what you mean, but I understand that the team put out, several messages and try and contact people and say, please get in touch with us. And we've asked about this as well. For that reason, are people really struggling or whatever? But there are a number of people who just refuse to pay, and it is targeted at them. I'll let Graham, because he might have some more detail.
Yeah.
No, other than you're right, it's about managing those, so being as empathetic as we can be whilst ensuring those who can pay do pay.
Okay, I just think we need to be careful on that the right people are being targeted, because it's bad enough not, with the court cases, the court costs and all the bits and pieces that get added on as it is, if you are definitely someone who's unable to pay.
I understand, but we do need to make sure that the people who can pay are not just going to take the mick, if you know what I mean. So,
okay, moving on to Norman.
Okay, thank you. Question on RAR4, page 94. I just wondered what sorts of things you had in mind to give the benefit realisation.
I don't know. I mean, what I know is we had some consultants in, and they've made some recommendations. I'm assuming Graham has seen the detail of this. I could be wrong, I could be right.
It's an ongoing programme of work that's been introduced since probably before, during and after the commercialisation strategy. So this is, we have staff in place that are there to help with income generation, cost reduction, and they work across the council, which will include adult social care, for example, and they've done some work with Optilus, which was beneficial, but they've also done some work in leisure, which has been beneficial. So it's a whole host of things about just trying to apply when I say commercial, it's probably best understood as a better value for money approach to what we're doing, is what I was saying. So it's an ongoing piece of work, and it's affected all parts of the council. And indeed, sponsorship, something Pauline raised, that was something that they picked up, and they're working with Place and Growth in particular about how we can introduce advertising and sponsorship in a more commercially minded way and a more comprehensive way.
And pretty much the same question on the next one, RE5. Again, what sort of things do you have in mind on that one? That's the contracts and commissioning services.
I understand that there was some SIP for consultants came in, which is fairly routine, and are made some recommendations to save money.
Yeah, it's a similar thing, absolutely. SIPFA came in, did a review, and on the back of that, we produced a new procurement strategy. We enhanced our procurement team because that's really important for levering in these efficiencies, and we set up new governance, which was a strategic procurement and commissioning board and a subgroup for contract management. So it's universal. Is helping contractors to be the best contract managers they can be, and they do need a lot of support in doing that. Is also bringing in consultants with a particular skilled consultancy to upskill our negotiations, our ability to do those harder-nosed negotiations. And so again, it applies to all contracts across the council, all commissioning activities and ongoing contract management. So it's, again, it will apply to all sorts.
Okay, Pauline.
Just made me think of something. I don't know if you looked at it, Graham, but R&D tax credits, where there's a uncertainty about the outcome of a project. You've got the £150,000 that you were going to write off because of feasibilities that hadn't worked. When you've got projects where there is an uncertainty about whether it's going to be successful or not, you can get R&D tax credit on the research and development part of that project, which might be useful to you if it applies to local government. I don't know if it does.
We've got the good fortune of not having to pay tax. No, I'm pleased we don't pay tax, Pauline.
I tried.
Well done. Yeah.
Okay, any other questions? No, it looks like we have done. Any other comments? No. Oh, Norman.
It's just coming into the sort of use of the council assets and these sorts of last questions, and Sarah's one as well. You know, it's how we, I suppose, interact with commercial entities to try and make more use of our council assets. You know, Sarah talked about voluntary groups and charities, which is great, and some of them can afford to pay their way, but others perhaps not. So I think we should probably look at commercial activities as, you know, commercial companies as potential partners in some of these things as well. It's probably worth having a look at.
He's wondering if we should use commercial companies as partners in some of our assets. Is that correct?
Yeah, in terms of the council assets and better utilisation, better profitability, if you like, then we should be speaking to truly commercial organisations, fully commercial organisations, as well as sort of voluntary and charity groups, just to see if there's ways that we can make use of the assets that we have and effectively make money out of it.
So you're asking, I think, about space that we give to charities and other organisations for not a lot of money or no rent at all. And should we be letting that space to more commercial organisations that can pay for it? Is that what you're...
No, that's not what no, not at all. I mean, we're doing good work with a lot of the charities and voluntary organisations, which is great, but we have other assets that perhaps would be, we could be sharing in some sort of way, utilising better with other organisations, which may be fully commercial organisations. But a lot of the charities are big national organisations, and they're, you know, they're pretty commercial as well. So I'm not saying substitute, I'm saying it's as well as if there are any opportunities to sort of move on and do other things.
If you've got anything specific, then, you know, certainly come to us with it and we'll think about it. But are we looking at all of our assets? Absolutely we are, including this place here. And if we can change some of our assets and make them more commercial, get some more income from them, including perhaps some of the space here, then we will definitely do it. But all of those things, I can assure you, are being looked at very carefully. But again, if you have anything specific that you think that we should be looking at, please get in contact with us.
Shirley.
Thank you. At Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny last night, we had a presentation by Emma from First Aid and Jake from Citizens Advice, obviously focusing more on the effect of the cost of living on increases on children. And one of the things that was mentioned was how quite a few, that the cost of childcare has become really prohibitive, but also, the costs of running childcare facilities have become prohibitive, and quite a number have closed down in the borough, which has meant that people who were working and perhaps having some sort of childcare are now out of work and claiming benefits because there's no childcare. And one of the things that I actually said was, well, we've got lots of space in this building, for example. Would there be a way of running some kind of childcare facility in this building at a sort of cheaper rate than it would be commercially, just to help perhaps low-income families? I certainly remember when I was doing part-time teaching for Reading Borough Council, they had a number of creches, on-site creches that were a reduced rate for staff. I don't know if it's something that could be considered, but I did throw it up last night, so I'm throwing it up again today.
We can certainly look at it, definitely, because we are looking at this building very, very carefully.
Okay, Al.
Yeah, just a question about why the Borough Council is now inserting a 12-month break clause in its leases to people like the town council, parish councils, so it stops them investing in long-term in services like youth services, and it seems to be a new policy. But
can I ask, is that part of this scrutiny meeting? I would hazard. Yeah, not too sure.
I'm not quite sure where you're going with that, because bear in mind I'm also a town councillor as well. So, is it a specific thing?
It's a question for legal services, really.
Yes.
Because early town council would like to move to.
It sounds like it's not for this meeting. Yeah.
Stop. I've no interest in this whatsoever. No, but what I'm trying to say, that's not part of the scrutiny. If you have that question, I think you can just bring it forward at another venue or point or council question. Any other questions there? Bear in mind, we've got 4 minutes left. No? Okay, so we've got we'll call a close to that one. We've got the work programme.
Chairman, I'll just be 1 minute. By the way, don't forget about organisation foundation programmes as shown on this slide here, and it incorporates many of the things you've talked about: asset opportunities, sweating our assets, getting the best, making sure we only occupy those that we should be occupying, protecting the council's interests, which includes annual break clauses and the like, contracts and procurement, and driving through the best value contracts that we possibly can, etc., etc. This lot, and this is supported by the change team that you referenced, David, but I know we'll come back with more detail, but they are at the heart of driving this. And these are the credits that appear in our MTFP, and you'll see they're across those different organisation foundations. Obviously, the more we can, these are in addition to all the specifics you've seen. So I'll stop there unless there's any questions.
Okay, before Pauline asks a question, we are dead on the deadline, so we've just got to have a vote. I've been advised to say we can extend to ask your question. So quick vote to say, can we extend to 11 o'clock? Let's not use it. Yep, unanimous. Okay. Pauline, ask your question.
Sorry, it's another wacky idea. I was just wondering about some of your facilities like your call centre and whether there is the opportunity to extend their remit slightly into areas like, I don't know, fire or NHS or something like that, where you could provide a service, you've got the people, you've got the infrastructure, you could sweat the assets a bit harder and maybe get an income. Just a thought. It was coming from Norman's suggestion. I just started to think about it.
I was just going to log it as a...
Graham's logged it, but I mean, well, my other half is the vice chair of Royal Berkshire Fire Rescues. And from what I could tell, that they're very specifically trained, the people who do that, and the police, and basically the 999 callers and things like this.
I wasn't thinking about 999 calls. I was thinking about
other calls as
other
well.
calls, yeah.
I mean, certainly, yeah. I mean, if there is potential for using the call centre for other things, and they've got the capacity, it should be a realistic thing that we should look at.
Thought it might be worth thinking about how you extend, you know, a very good service, because it is a very good service. They're very high performing, and maybe try and get some money out of it. I don't know.
Okay, moving on. Okay. Right, so we will move on to the work programme very quickly. Comments have to ask.
December.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Brian, question for you. The December meeting, is there an intention to bring anything finance related to that meeting or not? Because my suggestion would be, if not, could we split children's and adults to have one of them come to November and one of them come to December, just because we've also got 2 other items next time?
The potential problem with that is that adults and children, directors and lead members have all got that date in their diary, and I can't give you any assurance that they could make it the date if you split it. I do know they can make the date that we originally gave them, though.
Worth asking?
Of course, I'm just saying, but also okay, no, it's fine. No, sorry, to answer your question, there is nothing specific other than, I suppose it could be changes that I could present since lockdown 1 to lockdown 2. It will, of course, be before the local government finance settlement, so there can be another iteration of changes. So yeah, shall we just look into that then? Okay.
Okay, any other comments on the work programme? No. One takeaway action from this is let's change the template so we don't have the multicolour waste of ink.
Yeah, and just one more thing, just to inform members, the January meeting, which is currently stated as the 9th, is now officially been moved to the 23rd. This was mentioned before. This is to allow, as Graham said, time for the local government's finance settlement to sort of, look at the changing picture with that. And the only other thing with that we discussed, Peter, was whether we wanted another item on that date, a smaller item, if there was a need for it. So if there was a suggestion, but it's not necessary if not.
So if you've got suggestions for other items for that date, that'd be useful. I put pen down Thames Water because we've had lots of problems with them recently. We've also, I know Pauline's been in contact, is fibre rollout. That might be useful to come out. And yeah, by type of utilities type thing. So yeah. Okay. I'll call this meeting to a close. Thank you for your time and good evening.